Tonight we have something different for you. One story. Just one. But it goes deep. A backcountry ranger takes a solo posting at a station in the Shining Rock Wilderness, western North Carolina. He finds incident reports in a filing cabinet that are dated in the future. They describe things that haven't happened yet. And they're right about everything. Every name, every trail, every injury, every death. Down to the minute. He starts using them to save people. And that's when he finds out what the mountain charges for the favor. This one runs long and it runs dark. So settle in, turn the lights down, and I'll see you on the other side. I saved a man's life on October 12th because a piece of paper in a filing cabinet told me he was going to die. I found that paper a week early. Wrong handwriting, wrong date, right about everything else. I got to him before the mountain got to him, and I walked him out alive. Felt like I'd beaten something. Then I opened the drawer the next morning and found a fresh report. Same day, same hour, different person. A woman I had never heard of died in a ravine 6 miles from where I had been hauling a stranger to safety. The mountain didn't lose a body that night. It just swapped one for another. And I'm the one who made the trade. I need to tell you how I got there. Not because it makes it better. It doesn't. But because if you're ever standing in a ranger station at 3 a.m. holding a piece of paper that knows things it shouldn't, you need to understand what you're dealing with before you try to be a hero. I didn't understand. And someone died for it. My name is Caleb Morin. I'm 34. I spent 6 seasons fighting wildfire out west, 2 on hotshot crews in Montana, and 4 on engine teams bouncing between Idaho and eastern Oregon. I was good at it. Not brave, not reckless, just good at reading fire and staying calm when the line moved wrong. But fire seasons kept getting longer, and the off seasons kept getting shorter. And somewhere around year 5, I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up tasting smoke that wasn't there. I'd hear the pop of pitch pines in the walls of whatever motel room I was staying in between deployments. My hands started shaking during briefings. Not a lot. Just enough that I noticed, and once you notice something like that, you can't stop noticing. I put in for a transfer to the Eastern region in the spring of 2022. Backcountry ranger position, quiet posting, Pisgah National Forest in western North Carolina, deep in the Blue Ridge. The assignment was Elk Creek Station, a one-man outpost 12 miles up a Forest Service road in the Shining Rock Wilderness. My job was trail maintenance, backcountry patrols, visitor contacts, and wildlife monitoring. Year-round posting. Solo assignment. The kind of job they give to people who need a long stretch of quiet, which I did. The district ranger who processed my paperwork was a woman named Denise Farrow, mid-50s, been with the Forest Service since the Reagan years, had that particular steadiness you see in people who've spent their whole career in the same mountains. She walked me through the logistics in her office at the Pisgah District headquarters in Brevard, radio check-ins, twice, daily, morning and evening. Supply runs every 2 weeks. Down the mountain to the district office for mail, groceries, propane, and fuel. A maintenance tech named Travis Beckley would drive up every other Thursday to service the generator, check the water system, and handle anything structural I couldn't fix myself. I asked about the previous ranger, the one whose posting I was filling. Denise paused at that. Not a long pause, not dramatic, just the kind of half-second hesitation that tells you someone is choosing their words. Reed Sutherland, she said. Good ranger. Solid field skills. He left mid-rotation in August. Personal reasons. I asked if he'd given notice. He drove down on a Tuesday morning, turned in his keys and his radio, and said he couldn't stay at that station anymore. Didn't elaborate. Didn't file a formal complaint. Just said the posting wasn't a good fit. I asked if his personal effects were still up there. Another pause. Shorter this time. Some. We boxed what we could. There might be a few things still in the bunk room. If you find anything, just bring it down on your next supply run. That should have been the first thing I paid attention to. A competent ranger walking off a posting mid-rotation without explanation, leaving his belongings behind. In fire, we had a term for the moment a situation shifts from manageable to dangerous. We called it the trigger point. The moment the conditions change and the whole thing moves in a direction you can't pull back from. That conversation was my trigger point. I just didn't know it yet. I drove up to Elk Creek on September 27th. The Forest Service road was gravel for the first 8 miles, then packed dirt for the last 4, climbing through switchbacks thick with rhododendron and Fraser fir. The road was in decent shape but narrow, 1 lane in most places with occasional pullouts where you could squeeze past an oncoming vehicle, though I didn't pass anyone the whole way up. The higher I climbed, the quieter it got. Not just fewer cars, fewer birds, fewer insects. The forest thickened until the canopy closed over the road and the light went gray-green, even though it was midday. Elk Creek Station sat in a small clearing at the end of the road, backed up against a stand of old-growth hemlock. It was a timber frame building, single-story, maybe 900 square feet. Green metal roof, stone chimney, a covered porch running the length of the front wall, with a plain wooden bench and a steel fire ring in the yard. Beside the station was a small utility shed housing the generator, a propane tank on a concrete pad, and a gravel parking area big enough for 2 trucks. The whole setup looked like it had been built in the 1960s and maintained by people who cared about function and nothing else. I parked my truck and sat for a minute with the engine off, listened. The creek the station was named for ran about 40 yards behind the building, and I could hear it moving over rocks, wind in the hemlocks. Nothing else. No traffic noise, no aircraft, no voices, just the water and the trees. I remember thinking that this was exactly what I needed. The front door was unlocked. Denise had told me it would be. The interior was simple. 1 main room that served as office and living space, with a desk, a wood stove, a small kitchen area along the back wall, a table with 2 chairs, and built-in shelving stacked with field guides, topo maps, and radio equipment. To the right of the main room was a short hallway with 2 doors. One opened to a small bathroom with a composting toilet and a shower fed by the gravity flow water system. The other opened to the bunk room, which had a single bed, a footlocker, and a wall-mounted shelf. Reed Sutherland had left more than a few things. There was a flannel shirt hanging on a hook behind the bunk room door, a pair of reading glasses on the shelf. A coffee mug on the desk in the main room with a brown ring dried inside it. A paperback copy of Blood Meridian on the nightstand, with a receipt from a Brevard bookshop marking his page. He'd made it about 2/3 of the way through. I moved his things into a cardboard box and set it by the front door to bring down on my first supply run. The mug I washed and put back in the cabinet. I didn't need to keep looking at it. The filing cabinet was against the wall behind the desk. Standard government issue, 4-drawer, gunmetal gray, the kind you see in every Forest Service office in America. The top 3 drawers were organized neatly. Trail condition reports, wildlife observation logs, weather data, visitor contact forms, radio maintenance records, all filed by date with color-coded tabs. Whoever had set up this system, whether it was Reed or someone before him, was meticulous about it. Every document in the right folder. Every folder in the right order. Nothing misfiled, nothing loose, nothing out of place. The bottom drawer was different. The bottom drawer had a hanging folder in the back, behind the current year's incident reports, that was unlabeled. No tab, no date range. Just a plain manila folder with maybe 15 sheets of paper inside. I pulled it out and sat at the desk. They were incident reports. Standard Forest Service form. The ones we use to document anything from a sprained ankle on a trail to a bear encounter to a missing hiker. I had filled out hundreds of them over the years. I knew what they looked like. These looked right. The formatting was correct, the fields were filled in properly, and the handwriting was neat, careful, the kind of penmanship you see from people who learned to write before computers took over. But the dates were wrong. The first report was dated October 3rd. I was reading it on September 27th. The second was October 7th. The third, October 9th. They went out about 6 weeks. The last one dated sometime in the second week of November. And they weren't blank templates. They were filled in. Completed reports describing specific incidents, specific people, specific locations, specific injuries and outcomes. I read the first one. It described a solo hiker on the Art Loeb Trail, male, early 50s, gray beard, blue osprey pack, Salomon boots, falling on a section of exposed rock near the Tennant Mountain summit. Left ankle fracture. The report gave GPS coordinates for the fall location, the weather conditions at the time, and the name of the hiker, Gerald Pemberton. The time of the incident was listed as 2:15 in the afternoon. I read it twice. Then I put it down and looked at the date again. October 3rd. I told myself it was a typo. Someone had written 2022 when they meant 2021, or 2020 when they meant 2019. It happens. People write the wrong year on checks for the first 3 months of January. Same principle. I told myself that. I put the folder back in the drawer and closed it. But I didn't throw the reports away. I don't know why. Something about the handwriting, maybe. It was too careful, too deliberate. Every letter formed with intention, every number precise. It wasn't the handwriting of someone making a mistake. It was the handwriting of someone who knew exactly what they were putting on paper. I spent the rest of that day settling in, tested the radio and made my first check-in with dispatch, got the generator running, stocked the kitchen with the groceries I'd brought up, split some wood for the stove, walked the first mile of the nearest trailhead to get my bearings. By the time the sun dropped behind the ridgeline around 6:30, I had the wood stove going and a pot of coffee on, and the station felt like mine, or close to mine. Close enough. That night I lay in the bunk room listening to the creak and the occasional creak of the building settling in the cold. The temperature had dropped into the low 40s. The station smelled like wood smoke and old paper, and something else underneath, something faintly metallic, like a filing cabinet that had been closed too long. I told myself that was exactly what it was, and went to sleep. I woke up at 4 in the morning, not from a nightmare, not from a sound. I just opened my eyes and I was completely awake, the way you come alert in fire when conditions shift, heart rate up, breathing shallow, every sense pulling information from the dark. The station was quiet. The creek was running. The stove had burned down to coals. Nothing was wrong, except the light was on in the main room. I hadn't left the light on. I was certain of that. I had turned everything off before bed because the generator ran on propane, and propane meant supply runs, and I was 12 miles from the nearest fill station. I did not leave lights on. I got up and walked into the main room. The desk lamp was on. The filing cabinet's bottom drawer was open about 3 inches. Not all the way, just cracked, the way a drawer sits when someone has closed it, but the track didn't catch. I pushed the drawer shut. I turned off the lamp. I checked the front door, which was still locked. I checked the windows, which were all latched. I looked out every window and saw nothing but black trees and the faint silver line of the creek in the moonlight. I went back to bed and lay there for a long time. The metallic smell was stronger now, or I was imagining that it was. I thought about Reed Sutherland leaving his coffee mug and his book and his reading glasses and driving down the mountain without looking back. I thought about Denise Farrow choosing her words. I told myself that old buildings have old wiring and drawers settle on their tracks, and none of this meant anything. I slept, eventually. When I woke up at 7, the lamp was off and the drawer was closed. I checked. It was closed tight. I pulled it open and looked at the unlabeled folder. The reports were still there. I counted them. 15, same as before. I closed the drawer and made coffee and did my morning radio check-in and started my first full day at Elk Creek Station. I had trails to walk and campsites to inspect and register boxes to check. I had real work to do. I did not need to think about incident reports dated in the future, written in handwriting I didn't recognize, sitting in a filing cabinet that opened itself at 4 in the morning. So I didn't think about it. For 6 days, I didn't think about it. October 3rd changed that. I was on the Art Loeb Trail that morning, doing a routine patrol between the Shining Rock Trailhead and the Tennant Mountain Junction. Clear day. Temperature in the mid-50s. Leaves were turning hard, the whole canopy going orange and red and the yellow so bright it almost hurt to look at. Good hiking weather. I had been out since 8, and I had already logged 4 visitor contacts, all of them day hikers, all of them in good shape, all of them unremarkable. Around noon, I stopped at a rock outcrop near the Tennant summit to eat lunch. I sat on the exposed granite and looked out over the ridgeline and ate a peanut butter sandwich and drank water from my bottle. The valley below was full of color. I could see the Blue Ridge Parkway snaking along the far ridge like a gray thread. A red-tailed hawk was circling a thermal a few hundred feet below me. I remember thinking that this was the first time in months my hands weren't shaking. Then I saw the hiker. He was coming up the trail from the south, moving at a steady pace. Male, early 50s, gray beard, blue pack. I could see the Osprey logo from 60 yards away. His boots were Salomons, the trail running style with the quick lace system. He was alone. He was heading toward the exposed rock section where the trail narrows along the summit ridge. Every detail matched, every single one. The peanut butter went dry in my mouth. I put down my sandwich and pulled out the notebook I carry in my chest pocket, where I'd written down the key details from that first report the morning after I found it. I don't know why I'd written them down. The same instinct that kept me from throwing the reports away, maybe. Some part of my brain was already running calculations my conscious mind hadn't authorized. Blue Osprey pack, gray beard, Solomons, solo, Art Loeb Trail, Tennant Mountain. The time on the report was 2:15 p.m. It was 12:20. I watched the hiker approach. He waved when he saw me, and I waved back, and he stopped to chat. His name was Gerald Pemberton. He told me that himself, offered it up the way hikers do when they meet a ranger on the trail, because they think it's polite or because they want someone to know where they are. He was from Asheville, retired teacher. Been hiking the Art Loeb sections over the past year, finishing what he'd started. Gerald Pemberton. Same name as the report. My mouth opened, and I almost told him. I almost said something about the exposed rock section ahead, the section where the trail narrows and the granite gets slick even in dry weather. I wanted to tell him to be careful. I wanted to tell him to watch his left ankle. But what was I supposed to say? I read a report about your future, and you're going to fall at 2:15 this afternoon? He'd think I was insane. I'd think I was insane. Instead, I told him the trail was in good condition, but to watch his footing on the exposed sections near the summit, standard ranger advisory, the kind of thing I'd say to any hiker on any day. He thanked me and moved on. I sat on that rock for another 10 minutes, chewing on the inside of my cheek and telling myself I was making connections that didn't exist. Coincidence. A common name, a common pack brand, a common boot brand. The Art Loeb is one of the most popular trails in western North Carolina. Of course, someone matching a generic description would show up on it. This was nothing. I went back to my patrol. I checked trail markers. I cleaned out a fire ring at a backcountry site. I logged 2 more visitor contacts. I did my job. And the whole time, the clock in my head was ticking toward 2:15. At 1:45, I was on my way back toward the Tennant Junction when I heard the whistle. 3 short blasts, the universal signal for distress. It came from the direction of the exposed rock section, about a quarter mile ahead of me. I ran. I found Gerald Pemberton sitting on the trail with his left leg extended in front of him and his face the color of wet concrete. He'd slipped on a section of smooth granite where the trail crosses an exposed slab. His left ankle was already swelling through his boot. He was conscious, alert, and in a lot of pain. He told me he'd heard something behind him on the trail, turned to look, and lost his footing. I splinted his ankle with a SAM splint from my first aid kit and helped him hobble down to a point where the trail met a fire road. I called it in on the radio, and a crew from the district office drove up with a litter. They transported Gerald to the hospital in Brevard, left ankle fracture, just like the report said. I checked my watch when the crew arrived, 2:23 p.m. The incident had occurred approximately 8 minutes before I reached him. If the report's timestamp of 2:15 was the moment of the fall, it was accurate to within a few minutes. That evening I sat at the desk in the station with the bottom drawer open and the folder spread out in front of me. I read every report, all 15. I read them slowly, carefully, the way you read a fire behavior forecast when your crew's position depends on getting it right. I noted the dates, the names, the locations, the incident types. I looked for a pattern in the handwriting. It was consistent throughout. Same pen pressure, same letter formation, same careful, deliberate style. Not my handwriting. Not Reed Sutherland's, unless he'd changed his hand completely between filling out the other reports in the cabinet and writing these. I went to the top drawer and pulled a report I knew Reed had written. A trail condition assessment from June, signed at the bottom with his name and badge number. His handwriting was loose, slightly sloppy, the kind of script you develop when you're filling out paperwork in the field with cold hands or bad light. Nothing like the handwriting in the undated folder. Not even close. So someone else had written these. Someone with access to the station, access to the filing cabinet, access to incident report forms, and knowledge of events that hadn't happened yet. Someone who had been right about Gerald Pemberton down to the color of his pack and the brand of his boots and the bone he'd break and the approximate minute he'd break it. I closed the folder. I put it back in the drawer. I sat at the desk with my hands flat on the surface and stared at the wall. The metallic smell was back. Faint, but there, like the air inside the cabinet was leaking into the room. My next radio check-in was at 8 p.m. I called dispatch, gave them the incident report on Gerald Pemberton, and signed off. Then I switched to the district admin channel and called Denise directly. She picked up on the second call. I could hear the quiet of her office behind her voice, the hum of a building after hours. Caleb, what's going on? The filing cabinet in this station. Bottom drawer. There's an unlabeled folder with incident reports in it. Did Reed leave those? Silence. Not the half-second pause from her office. Longer. 5 seconds. 8. Caleb. Yeah. Don't read those. I already read them. Another silence. Then, we'll talk about it on your next supply run. Don't read any more of them, and don't do anything based on what's in them. One of them came true today, Denise. I know. That's why I'm telling you not to read the rest. She signed off. I set the handset down. The drawer was closed. I hadn't closed it. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the bunk room and listened to the building and the creek and the wind, and around 2 a.m. I heard something I hadn't heard before. A sound from the main room. Soft, rhythmic, paper. The sound of someone turning pages. Slow, deliberate, 1 page at a time. I did not get up. I did not go check. I lay in the dark with my eyes open and my hands flat on my chest, and I listened to whatever was in my station going through its files. After maybe 20 minutes, the sound stopped. Then the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet closed with a soft metallic click. Then silence. In the morning, I opened the drawer. The unlabeled folder now held 18 reports. 3 new ones. They hadn't been there the night before. I knew because I'd counted. 15. Now 18. The first new report was dated October 12th. A day hiker with a cardiac event on the Mountains to Sea Trail, 4 miles from the nearest road. The report included his physical description, the make of his car parked at the trailhead, and the precise time his heart would stop. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up the radio and canceled my morning patrol. I told dispatch I was staying close to the station for maintenance. Then I sat down at the desk and read all 18 reports again, start to finish, and I started mapping them. Dates, locations, severity. I spread a topographic map of the district across the table. I marked each incident with a red pen. The pattern was clear. They radiated outward from the station like spokes on a wheel, each one on a different trail, each one within a day's hike of Elk Creek. Whatever was writing these reports knew the district the way I knew fire. It knew the terrain and the weather and the people who would walk through it and exactly what would happen to them and when. It knew things no person could know. And it had been putting that knowledge on paper and filing it in a government issue cabinet in a ranger station in the middle of nowhere, and it had been doing it long enough to have a system. I should have driven down the mountain that day. I should have turned in my keys and my radio just like Reed Sutherland and told Denise the posting wasn't a good fit and never looked back. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. But Gerald Pemberton was alive because I had read a report. He had a broken ankle. He didn't have a broken neck. He didn't bleed out alone on an exposed ridge. because no one knew he was there. He was alive and in a hospital bed, going home to Asheville because I'd read a piece of paper that told me where he'd be and what would happen to him, and I got there in time. The next report was dated October 12th. A man was going to have a heart attack on a trail 4 miles from the nearest road, and I had 9 days to figure out how to be in the right place at the right time. I told myself I was helping people. I told myself this was the reason I'd been put at this station. I told myself a lot of things that October, while the leaves turned and fell and the reports kept appearing in the drawer, I was wrong about all of it. But I didn't know that yet. Travis Beckley came up on October 5th, right on schedule, every other Thursday like Denise had said. He drove a white Forest Service pickup with a toolbox in the bed and a magnetic door sign that read USDA Forest Service Facilities Maintenance. He was about 40, wiry, with a sun-worn face and a North Carolina accent so thick you could have spread it on toast. He'd been servicing backcountry stations in the Pisgah for 12 years. He knew every building, every generator, every water line in the district. He also didn't talk much, which I appreciated. He spent the first 2 hours checking the generator, changing the oil, testing the battery bank, and replacing a worn belt on the water pump. I helped where I could and stayed out of his way where I couldn't. Around noon, we sat on the porch and ate lunch. He had a thermos of coffee and a ham sandwich. I had leftover rice and beans from the night before. We sat in silence for a while. Then Travis said, "Reed left in a hurry. That's what I heard. I was up here the Thursday before he quit. He was different. Jumpy. Kept looking at the filing cabinet like it owed him money." I set my fork down. "You notice anything weird about that cabinet?" Travis chewed his sandwich and looked out at the tree line. "I noticed that every ranger who works this station longer than a month starts asking me that question." "How many rangers have worked this station?" "Since I've been doing maintenance?" 8, counting you. How long does the average one last?" 2 quit before Christmas. 3 made it to spring. 1 lasted almost 2 years. Reed was about average, 7 months. The one who lasted 2 years. What happened to him? Travis finished his sandwich and folded the wax paper into a neat square. "Virgil Pruitt, retired, lives down in Waynesville now. You should talk to him." "What would he tell me?" "That the cabinet's been doing what it does since before I was born, and that the best thing you can do is either leave or learn the rules." "What rules?" Travis stood up and brushed the crumbs off his jeans. "That's Virgil's conversation, not mine. I fix generators. I don't fix whatever's going on in there." He nodded toward the station door. "I just know that every ranger who tries to use those reports to play hero ends up in the drawer himself eventually." He said it the way you'd say, "The sky is blue," or "The creek runs downhill." Just a fact. No drama, no warning, no emphasis. Then he went back to work on the water pump, and we didn't talk about it again. But the words stayed with me. Drawer. Not ends up in the reports, ends up in the drawer. Like the cabinet was a mouth, and the reports were teeth, and the people in them were food. I should tell you about the days between October 5th and October 12th, because that's when I started to lose the boundary between being a ranger and being whatever the station wanted me to be. The reports kept coming. I'd wake up in the morning and there would be new ones in the folder, never more than 2 or 3 at a time, always in the same handwriting, always dated between 2 and 14 days in the future, and they were always right. October 8th, the report said a section of the Ivester Gap Trail would be blocked by a fallen hemlock at a specific location. I hiked out there the day before. The tree was standing, healthy. No visible damage, no lean, no root rot. The next morning I heard it come down from a mile away, a sound like a slow crack of thunder rolling through the valley. I hiked back out. It had fallen across the trail at exactly the spot the report described, blocking the path between 2 rock outcrops so completely that a hiker would have to climb over or go around through thick rhododendron. October 10th. A report described 2 hikers, a married couple from Charlotte, getting separated in fog on the Black Balsam Knob. The report gave their names, their car's make and license plate, and the ravine where the husband would end up after losing the trail in zero visibility. I checked the weather forecast. Clear skies for the next 3 days. No fog. But on the morning of the 10th, a cloud bank rolled up from the valley so thick I couldn't see the porch railing from the front door. It came in fast, faster than any fog I'd ever seen, even in the mountains where weather builds in minutes. I drove to the Black Balsam parking area and found the car, a silver Honda with Charlotte plates. The plate number matched the report. I intercepted the couple at the trailhead before they started hiking, told them the trail was closed due to conditions. They were annoyed but compliant. They drove away alive and together. I checked the report that evening. The text hadn't changed. It still described the husband falling into the ravine. The outcome it predicted simply hadn't happened because I'd gotten in the way. That felt good. I won't pretend it didn't. I felt like I was doing something that mattered, not just filing paperwork or counting hikers or checking fire rings. I was pulling people out of the path of things they couldn't see coming. I was using information that no one else had to keep people alive. And every morning, the cabinet gave me more. I stopped questioning where the reports came from. I stopped lying awake listening for the sound of pages turning. I started treating the cabinet the way I'd treated a fire weather forecast, as data. Reliable, actionable, impersonal data. The source didn't matter. The accuracy did. And the accuracy was perfect. I was sleeping better than I had in years. Travis came back on October 19th, 2 weeks since his last visit. He did his maintenance checks and then sat on the porch with his coffee and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You look rested," he said. "I am. You've been reading the reports every morning, and you've been acting on them. I've prevented 4 incidents in the past 2 weeks, 2 injuries, a lost hiker, and a potential hypothermia case, all from information in those reports." Travis sipped his coffee. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "You know what a snare looks like, Caleb? A snare. A trap. For animals. You bait them with something they want. Food, usually. And the thing about a good snare is the animal doesn't know it's caught until it tries to leave. You're saying the reports are bait. I'm saying you look rested and you feel useful, and the cabinet keeps giving you more, and none of that worries you. And it should." I didn't have an answer for that. Travis finished his coffee and went to check the generator, and we didn't talk about it anymore. That night, I sat at the desk and opened the bottom drawer and counted the reports. 26. There had been 18 when Travis was last here. 8 new ones in 14 days. And the dates were reaching further into the future now. The most recent one was dated November 15th, almost a month out. I pulled it and read it. It was different from the others, not in format. Same form, same handwriting, same precise detail. But the incident it described wasn't an accident. It wasn't a fall or a weather event or a medical emergency. It described a hiker going missing. A specific hiker, male, 28, from Knoxville, solo, with a red Gregory pack and a blue rain shell. The report said he would enter the Shining Rock Wilderness on November 15th via the Big East Fork trailhead and would not come out. No body recovered. Case status, open. At the bottom of the report, in the same careful handwriting, was a line I hadn't seen on any of the others. It read, "No intervention recommended." I stared at that line for a long time. Every other report had been neutral. Facts and outcomes, nothing more. No instructions, no suggestions, no editorial. This was the first time the reports had told me what to do, or rather, what not to do. I put the report back in the folder. I closed the drawer. The metallic smell was strong enough now that I could taste it in the back of my throat, like licking a penny. I looked at the cabinet, and for the first time since Gerald Pemberton, I felt afraid. Not afraid of what was in the reports. Afraid of what the reports were making me into. A man who sat at a desk every morning and read the future and decided who to save. A man who was starting to think of it as his job, his purpose, his reason for being at this station. Travis was right. I didn't feel caught. and that was exactly how you know you are. The October 12th report was the one about the cardiac event. Male, 61, retired electrical contractor from Greenville, South Carolina. Name, Wayne Jessup. The report said he would be hiking the Mountains to Sea Trail, a moderate section that follows the parkway for about 6 miles before dropping into a drainage. At approximately 1:40 in the afternoon, his heart would stop. The report listed contributing factors the way a medical examiner would: undiagnosed coronary artery disease, exertion at elevation, insufficient hydration. It listed his time of death as 1:53 p.m. 13 minutes between cardiac arrest and brain death, alone on a trail with no cell service and no other hikers within earshot. I had the report on October 5th, 7 days. I thought about what Travis said about snares, about bait, and then I thought about a 61-year-old man dying alone on a trail because I was too careful to walk out there and stop it, and I couldn't make those two thoughts exist in the same room. So I started planning. The Mountains to Sea section the report described was about 8 miles from Elk Creek by trail, or 12 by road if I drove to the nearest parkway access point and hiked in from there. Either way, I needed to be in position before 1:40. I figured I'd drive to the access point on the morning of the 12th, hike in, and find a reason to be on that section of trail at the right time. Routine patrol. Visitor contacts. The kind of thing a ranger does every day. Except this time I'd know exactly who I was looking for and exactly what was about to happen to him. On October 11th, I packed my field kit: first aid, SAM splint, radio, 2 liters of water, my chest pack with notebook and pen. I also packed the portable AED from the station's emergency supplies. It was a life pack unit, bulky, added maybe 4 pounds to my load. I'd been trained on it during my wildland fire certification. I had used one once, on a hotshot who collapsed during a burnout operation in Idaho. That time it hadn't worked. The man died. His name was Pete Sorrell, and he was 29, and he had a daughter who had just turned 2. I packed the AED anyway. The morning of October 12th was cold and clear. I drove to the parkway access point, parked at an overlook, and hiked in along the Mountains to Sea Trail heading east. The forest was quiet. The leaves had mostly turned by now, and the understory was thinning, opening up sightlines through the trees that had been closed by foliage a few weeks earlier. I could see further in every direction, which should have been comforting. It wasn't. The openness felt like exposure, like whatever was writing those reports could see me coming. I reached the section described in the report around 11:30 and found a spot where I could sit and wait without looking like I was waiting. A rock ledge beside the trail with a view of the valley. I ate lunch. I watched the trail. I checked my watch. I tried not to think about the fact that I was sitting on a mountain waiting for a stranger's heart to stop. Wayne Jessup came up the trail at 12:50, right on time. He was tall, thick through the middle, with white hair under a brown cap and a day pack that looked like it had been through a few seasons. He was breathing harder than the grade warranted. His face was red. He stopped when he saw me and smiled and asked if the trail got any steeper ahead. I said it leveled out in about a mile. I asked how he was feeling. Good, he said. Winded. Probably should have trained more before this trip. I told him there was no shame in taking breaks. Told him to drink water. Told him the standard things. He thanked me and kept hiking. I waited 2 minutes and then followed. I kept him in sight for the next 45 minutes, hanging back far enough that he wouldn't feel watched, but close enough that I could reach him in a sprint. The trail wound through a mixed hardwood section, gently climbing, then dropped into a drainage where a small creek crossed the path over exposed rock. Wayne stopped at the creek to drink water and splash his face. He looked tired but steady. At 1:37 he was on a section of trail that climbed a short, steep grade between 2 laurel thickets. He was moving slowly. His breathing was audible from 50 yards back. At 1:41 he stopped walking. He stood still for a moment, one hand on his chest, his face shifting from red to gray in a way that I recognized, because I'd seen it once before on a mountainside in Idaho. I was running before he hit the ground. He went down on his right side. By the time I reached him, maybe 15 seconds later, he was unconscious, no pulse. I rolled him onto his back, started chest compressions, and got the AED out of my pack. The pads went on his chest. The machine analyzed his rhythm and advised a shock. I cleared and pressed the button, and his body jerked, and the machine told me to continue CPR. I did compressions for another 2 minutes. The AED analyzed again. Another shock. More compressions. Somewhere in the third cycle, Wayne Jessup's heart started beating on its own. He gasped. His eyes opened. He looked at me with the confusion of a man who'd been somewhere else entirely and wasn't sure how he'd gotten back. I radioed for medical evacuation. A Parkway ranger met us with an ATV about 40 minutes later, and they transported Wayne to the hospital in Asheville. He survived. Full recovery. The doctors told him he had a 90% blockage in his left anterior descending artery that nobody had caught. If he'd been alone on that trail, he would have been dead in 15 minutes. The report had said 13. I drove back to Elk Creek that evening feeling like a man who'd done something real. Something that mattered more than fire lines and paperwork and all the other ways I'd spent my career trying to keep people alive. I'd read a piece of paper, and a man was breathing because of it. Whatever the cabinet was, whatever wrote those reports, it had given me the ability to be in the right place at the right time with the right equipment, and I had used that gift and it had worked. I took a shower. I made dinner. I sat on the porch in the dark and drank coffee and listened to the creek and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then I went inside and opened the filing cabinet. There was a new report in the folder. The paper was warm, not room temperature, warm, like it had been sitting in a beam of sunlight or held in someone's hands. The ink was fresh enough to smell. I hadn't been gone more than 9 hours, and in that time something had opened the drawer, placed a new report inside, and closed it again. The station had been locked. I checked the windows when I walked in. Nothing was disturbed, nothing was out of place. But the report was there, and it hadn't been there when I left. I read it standing at the cabinet, with the drawer open, and the smell of ink and metal filling my lungs. Same date, October 12th, same time, 1:53 p.m., the time the original report had listed as Wayne Jessup's time of death. Different name, Catherine Marsh, female, 34, school teacher from Hendersonville, hiking alone on the Graveyard Fields Trail, a popular loop about 6 miles south of the Mountains to Sea section where I'd been crouching over Wayne's chest doing compressions. She had slipped on wet rock at a waterfall overlook and fallen approximately 40 feet into the drainage below. The report described her injuries. I won't repeat them. It described the time she was found by another hiker approximately 4 hours after the fall. It described the fact that she was still conscious when the hiker reached her, and that she died during the helicopter evacuation. The time of her fall was listed as 1:53 p.m., the same minute, the exact same minute that Wayne Jessup would have died if I hadn't been there with an AED and 12 years of field medicine training. I put the report down on the desk. I sat in the chair. I looked at it. 1:53 p.m. I'd been kneeling on a trail 8 miles north, listening to an AED charge for a second shock, while a woman I'd never heard of stepped onto wet rock and fell 40 feet into a creek bed. While I was pulling Wayne Jessup back from wherever he'd gone, Catherine Marsh was lying in a ravine with injuries I won't describe, alone, waiting for someone to find her. She waited 4 hours. She died in a helicopter. The original report had predicted Wayne Jessup's death at 1:53 p.m. on October 12th. I had prevented it, and at 1:53 p.m. on October 12th, someone else had died instead. Same time, same minute, same mountain range, different trail, different name, different cause, but the same outcome. One body, one death. The ledger balanced. I didn't choose Catherine Marsh. I want you to know that. I didn't know her name until I read that new report standing at the cabinet at 9:30 at night. I didn't know she existed. I didn't know she was on a trail 6 miles south of me while I was saving a stranger's life. I didn't make a conscious decision to let her die, but the cabinet made that decision for me. Or it let me make it without knowing I was making it, which is worse when I think about it. At least a conscious choice means you understood the stakes. I didn't understand anything, I just thought I was helping. I sat at the desk for a long time that night. The metallic smell was so strong it felt like the air had weight to it, pressing against my skin, filling the room with something that wasn't quite a presence and wasn't quite a smell and wasn't quite a sound, but was all three of those things layered on top of each other. The filing cabinet sat against the wall and did nothing. It didn't open. It didn't make sounds. It just sat there, the way it had sat there for decades, holding its reports and waiting for someone to read them and act on them and learn, eventually, what acting on them cost. I thought about calling Denise. I picked up the radio handset twice and put it back down both times. What would I say? I saved a man today and a woman died, and I think the mountain traded one for the other, and I think the filing cabinet knew it would happen. She'd pull me off the posting, she'd send someone to evaluate me. She might be right, too. I thought about driving down the mountain, getting in my truck and taking the 12 miles of gravel and dirt back to the paved world and never coming back. Reed Sutherland had done it. 7 other rangers before me had done it, or close to it. Nobody would blame me. Nobody would even be surprised. But I kept thinking about Wayne Jessup's eyes opening. That gasp. That confused look of a man returning from a place he shouldn't have gone yet. I had done that. I had brought him back. And the fact that the mountain had charged a price for it didn't change the fact that he was alive and breathing and going home to Greenville. Did it. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and listened to the creek and thought about Catherine Marsh and whether she had been afraid and whether she had known that no one was coming for 4 hours and whether she had thought about her students while she waited in that ravine. Around 2 a.m, I heard the pages again. Slow, deliberate, one at a time. Something in the main room, going through its files. I got up. I walked into the main room in my socks and my thermal shirt, and I stood in the doorway and looked at the filing cabinet. The bottom drawer was open, about 6 inches. The desk lamp was off. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the wood stove coals coming through the damper vents. I couldn't see anything at the desk, couldn't see anyone. But I could hear the pages, and I could smell the metal, and I could feel something in the room the way you feel someone standing behind you in a line. Not sight, not sound, pressure. I know you're there, I said. The page turning stopped. The drawer closed. Slow, smooth. The way a drawer closes when someone eases it shut with their fingertips. Not a slam. A whisper of metal on metal. Then nothing. The room was empty. The pressure was gone. The metallic smell faded over the next few minutes until it was just the normal station smells of wood smoke and old paper and cold air. I walked to the cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. 2 new reports. I picked them up. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I'd expected them to shake. They didn't. Some part of me had moved past shaking. I was in the place you get to in a fire when the conditions are bad enough that fear becomes a waste of energy and you just start working the problem. The first new report was dated October 21st. A tree falling on a tent at a backcountry campsite. 2 hikers. The report described their injuries but also described them surviving, being airlifted out, spending weeks in the hospital, but living, a survivable incident if response was timely. The second report was dated October 23rd. A solo hiker going off trail and falling into an abandoned mine shaft on the edge of the wilderness boundary. The report described the fall. It described the hiker, lying at the bottom of a 30-foot vertical shaft with a broken back, unable to move, unable to call for help. It described her dying of exposure over 2 days. At the bottom of the second report, in the same careful handwriting, was a line I'd seen once before. No intervention recommended. I put the reports back. I closed the drawer. I went back to bed. But I didn't stop reading them. And I didn't stop acting on them. Because here's the thing about the cabinet that I didn't understand until much later. Until after everything happened and I was sitting in a motel room in Brevard with the heat on and the door locked and my hands finally shaking the way they should have been shaking all along. The cabinet doesn't force you to do anything. It doesn't make you read the reports. It doesn't make you act on them. It just puts them in the drawer and waits. And the waiting is the trap. Because once you know that a man is going to have a heart attack on a trail on a specific day at a specific time, you can't unknow it. The knowledge sits in your head like a splinter. You can ignore it, technically. You can leave the report in the drawer and go about your day and let the thing happen. But you won't. Not if you're the kind of person who became a ranger in the first place. Not if you spent 6 seasons running toward fire instead of away from it. Not if you carry an AED up a mountain on the off chance that today is the day someone needs it. The cabinet knows what kind of person gets assigned to Elk Creek. It knows because it's been watching rangers come and go for 60 years. It knows that the people who end up at remote backcountry stations are the ones who care enough to be there and the ones who are just damaged enough to think they can handle being alone with something they don't understand. It picks its keepers the way a snare picks its prey, not by chasing them, by being exactly the kind of thing they can't walk away from. I couldn't walk away from it. Not yet. Not after Wayne Jessup. The weeks between October 12th and October 30th were the most focused I'd been since my first fire season. I had a system. Every morning I checked the drawer. Every morning there were new reports, sometimes 1, sometimes 3, never more than 4 at a time. I read them, mapped them, sorted them by date and severity. I created a triage protocol in my head, the same way I'd prioritize fire assignments, life-threatening incidents first, injury incidents second, property or wildlife incidents last. I started positioning myself on the trails before incidents were scheduled to happen. I became the most active backcountry ranger in the Pisgah district, logging more trail miles in October than most rangers log in a quarter. Denise noticed. She called me on the radio one afternoon and asked if everything was all right. Fine, I said. Just trying to be thorough. You're logging 20-mile days, Caleb. That's not thorough, that's something else. The trails are busy. Fall color season. The trails are always busy in October. You don't need to walk all of them every day. I told her I'd scale back. I didn't scale back. I kept reading. I kept moving. I kept getting there first. And it worked. I prevented a fatal hypothermia exposure on October 15th by redirecting a pair of underprepared hikers before a temperature drop. The forecast hadn't predicted, but the cabinet had. The report had listed both as fatalities, found frozen in their sleeping bags at a campsite with no insulation and no fire. I prevented a fall on October 19th by closing a section of trail that the report said would be undermined by a groundwater seep that hadn't surfaced yet. When I checked the trail on the 18th, the ground was stable. On the morning of the 19th, a 6-foot section of trail had collapsed into a drainage, exactly where the report said it would. If I hadn't put the closure signs up, someone would have been standing on that section when it went. Every intervention felt like proof. Proof that the cabinet was a tool, not a trap. Proof that I could use it and stay in control. Proof that I was doing good. The reports I didn't act on bothered me, but I found ways to file that feeling away. The ones marked "No intervention recommended" were rare. 2 in October. I told myself they were the exceptions. The cases where the variables were too complex or the outcome too uncertain for intervention to work. I told myself the cabinet was giving me honest information about its own limitations. I told myself a lot of things. October 21st came. The tree on tent report. I had been camped near the backcountry site since the previous evening, waiting. At 4:12 a.m., a dead hemlock let go in a wind gust and dropped across a 2-person tent with 2 hikers inside. I was there in 90 seconds. I got them out. One had a fractured collarbone. The other had lacerations from the branches, but nothing critical. I splinted the collarbone, treated the cuts, and radioed for evacuation. By dawn, they were in an ambulance heading for Mission Hospital in Asheville. I hiked back to the station that afternoon and opened the drawer. New report. Dated October 21st, same time as the tree incident. 4:12 a.m., different location, different person. A hunter on private land adjacent to the wilderness boundary, 2 miles from the campsite where I'd pulled hikers out of a crushed tent. The report said a dead hemlock fell on him while he was walking to his tree stand in the dark. Killed instantly. Same minute, same type of tree, same cause, same mountain, different person. I sat at the desk and read the report 3 times, and then I folded my arms on the desk and put my forehead down on them and stayed like that for a while. The metallic smell pressed against the back of my neck like a cold hand. The mountain wasn't losing anyone. It was collecting a specific number at a specific time. If I pulled someone out of the path, someone else stepped into it. Not by coincidence, by design. The reports weren't predictions, they were invoices. And when I voided one, the mountain issued a replacement. I looked up Catherine Marsh that afternoon, drove down to Brevard on my next supply run, and used the library computer to search local news archives. I found her obituary. 34. Elementary school teacher at a school in Hendersonville, survived by her parents and a younger brother. The article about her death described it as a hiking accident. A slip on wet rock at a waterfall overlook in the Graveyard Fields area. She was alone. She was found by another hiker approximately 4 hours after the fall. She died during helicopter evacuation. Every detail matched the report. I sat in the library for a long time. An older woman at the computer next to me was looking up recipes. A kid across the table was doing homework. Normal people doing normal things in a normal building with fluorescent lights and carpet and no filing cabinets full of futures. I looked up the hunter, found a brief news item in the Transylvania County paper. His name was Dale Redding, 57, retired, found by his hunting partner at dawn, dead hemlock. The tree had been standing dead for at least 3 years, according to the report. Could have fallen any time. It fell at 4:12 a.m. on October 21st, the same minute I was pulling 2 strangers out of a crushed tent 2 miles away. Dale Redding had a wife and 3 grown children. I read that line twice, and then closed the browser window and drove back up the mountain. That evening I sat on the porch, in the dark, and tried to think clearly. The cold air helped. It was late October now, and the nights were dropping into the high 20s. The creek had a skin of ice on the edges where the water pooled behind rocks. The stars were bright and hard, and the Milky Way stretched across the gap between the ridgelines like a smear of chalk on a blackboard. I laid out what I knew. The filing cabinet produced reports describing future incidents. The reports were accurate in every verifiable detail. When an incident was allowed to occur as described, the report remained the only record. When I intervened and prevented the described outcome, a new report appeared describing a different incident with the same outcome at the same time, 1 for 1, death for death. I had saved 3 people. Wayne Jessup, the 2 hikers in the tent. 3 people had died instead. Catherine Marsh, Dale Redding, and whoever the third was. I went inside and checked the folder. The new report from the tent incident described a death, not the hunter. A different person. A third death. An elderly man who had fallen on a wet porch step at a cabin 3 miles from the campsite. Same time, same morning, same mountain. I hadn't saved 3 people. I'd killed 3 others. Or the mountain had killed them, or we'd done it together. The distinction felt thin as tissue paper. I opened the drawer again. There were 29 reports in the folder now. I started reading the ones I hadn't acted on, the ones marked "No intervention recommended." They were different from the others. They described deaths that were complete, contained, self-enclosing, a hiker with terminal cancer taking a last walk and sitting down under a tree and not getting up, an elderly couple whose car went off a curve on the parkway in a rainstorm. The reports described these as settled, final. The cabinet wasn't asking me to do anything because there was nothing to trade. These deaths belonged to the people who died. They weren't currency. The others were. The falls, the heart attacks, The hypothermia cases, the drownings, those were open ledger items, transferable. The cabinet was showing me the ones I could move, the ones I could redirect, the ones where the mountain would accept a substitute if I provided one by intervening. I understood the system now. I wished I didn't. New reports began appearing on October 28th. 3 of them on that first morning, dated the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st. 2 were injury incidents. 1 was a fatality. I read them all. I mapped them. I put the folder back in the drawer and closed it. I did not act on the October 29th report. It described a hiker spraining a knee on a descent. Painful, not life-threatening. He'd limp out on his own and be sore for a month. I left it. I did not act on the October 30th report. It described a tent being flooded at a backcountry site during a heavy rain. 2 hikers, wet and cold but uninjured, would pack out the next morning. I left it. I did not act on the October 31st report. It described a man dying of a heart attack on the Avester Gap Trail at 6:14 in the morning. I left it. And that night, for the first time since my second week at the station, I heard something other than pages turning. I heard a sound from the main room that I can only describe as disappointment. Not a voice. Not a word. A feeling that entered the room through the walls and the floor and the air itself, like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm front. The station was unhappy with me. The bottom drawer opened on its own. I heard it from the bunk room. The metal slide of the track, the clunk of the stops, then silence. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, the drawer closed. In the morning, there were 4 new reports. The dates were close. November 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. All injuries. All preventable. And at the bottom of each one, a new line I hadn't seen before. Recommended action, intervene. The cabinet was done being patient with me. I didn't act on those either. I did my patrols. I did my radio check-ins. I filed real reports about real trail conditions and real visitor contacts. I tried to be a normal ranger at a normal station doing normal work. On October 31st, a man named Arthur Poole had a heart attack on the Avester Gap Trail at approximately 6:14 in the morning. He was alone. He died before anyone found him. His body was discovered by a pair of hikers around noon. I know this because I listened to it on the radio. The call came into dispatch while I was sitting at the desk in the station, and I heard every word of it and I did nothing. I knew his name before the call came in. I knew the time and the place and the cause, and I let it happen because I had learned what it cost to stop it. Arthur Poole was 63, retired post office worker from Charlotte. I looked him up later. He had a wife and 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren and a dog named Biscuit. I know that because his obituary mentioned the dog. His wife wrote it. You could tell because it read the way a person writes when they're trying to compress a whole life into 4 paragraphs and they can't decide what matters enough to include and what doesn't. So they put everything in, including the dog, because the dog mattered to him and she wanted people to know that. I could have saved him. I had the report. I knew the trail, the time, the condition. I could have been there with the AED at 6:10 and waited 4 minutes and brought him back the way I brought Wayne Jessup back. And somewhere on the mountain, within the same hour, someone else would have died in his place. Someone I'd never know. Someone whose wife would write an obituary that mentioned the things that mattered. And none of those things would include the fact that a ranger in a station 12 miles away had read a piece of paper and decided their life was the price of someone else's. That's the part I need you to understand. I'm telling you this because you need to know what happens when you start reading. You don't stop because the reports stop being accurate. They don't. Every single one I verified was correct to the smallest detail. You stop because you realize that the accuracy is the point. The cabinet gives you perfect information, so you'll act on it. And it gives you the consequence of acting, so you'll understand that you didn't save anyone, you just moved the pin on the map. And the map doesn't have any edges. I want to tell you about the 3 days between October 12th and October 15th. because those are the days I almost drove off the mountain. Not because of fear, because of something worse than fear, because of the math. I sat at the desk that first night after finding Catherine Marsh's report, and I started keeping a ledger, not in the filing cabinet, in my own notebook, the one in my chest pocket, the one I'd written Gerald Pemberton's details in 3 weeks earlier when I still thought I was being careful instead of being used. I drew a line down the center of a blank page. On the left side, I wrote the names of the people I'd saved. On the right side, I wrote the names of the people who had died in their place. Gerald Pemberton on the left, nobody on the right, because Gerald's incident was a broken ankle, not a fatality. The substitution, if there was one, hadn't been a death. It might have been another injury somewhere else, a twisted knee or a sprained wrist that I'd never know about because it wasn't severe enough to make the news. The cabinet traded in kind, injuries for injuries, deaths for deaths. The currency had to match. Wayne Jessup on the left, Catherine Marsh on the right, the two hikers in the crushed tent on the left, Dale Redding, and the man on the porch on the right. 3 saved, 3 dead, the ledger balanced. I looked at that page for a long time. Then I tore it out and burned it in the wood stove because putting it on paper made it real in a way I couldn't carry. But the burning didn't help because the math was still in my head even after the paper was ash. And the math said something I didn't want to hear. It said that every act of intervention was neutral. Not good, not evil, neutral. A lateral transfer, a redirect. I hadn't added any life to the mountain's total. I'd just moved it around, like rearranging furniture in a burning building. The fire doesn't care which room the couch is in. The night of October 13th, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in the bunk room and stared at the ceiling and ran the numbers. If the cabinet gave me a report about a man who was going to die on a trail, and I saved that man, and another person died at the same time on a different trail, had I done anything, the net outcome was the same. 1 death. Same number as if I'd never read the report. Same number as if the cabinet had never existed. But it wasn't the same to Wayne Jessup. That's the thought I kept coming back to. It wasn't the same to Wayne Jessup's wife when he came home from the hospital instead of coming home in a box. It wasn't the same to his kids and his grandkids and whatever future he had left. To Wayne Jessup, the intervention was everything. It was the difference between existing and not existing. And the fact that Catherine Marsh paid for it with her life didn't change the value of Wayne Jessup's life. It just changed the cost. But then I think about Catherine Marsh's students, about the classroom that didn't have a teacher on Monday morning, about the parents who had to explain to their children why Miss Marsh wasn't coming back. And the math would collapse again because Catherine Marsh's life had the same value as Wayne Jessup's life, and the trade hadn't created any net good. It had just selected a winner and a loser, and I was the one holding the selection form. That's what the cabinet does. It makes you the mechanism, not the hero, the mechanism, the sorting function in an equation that was going to resolve itself one way or another. The mountain was going to take its 1 death at 1:53 p.m. on October 12th, no matter what. The only variable I controlled was which name went on the report. On October 14th, I drove to the overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway where you can see the whole Shining Rock wilderness laid out below you, the ridgelines falling away in layers like the folds of a quilt. I sat on the stone wall and looked at the mountain and tried to think about it the way a fire investigator thinks about a fire. Not the emotion, the mechanics, the cause and effect, the chain of events that led to the outcome. The mountain needed a specific number of incidents in a specific time frame. I didn't know how the number was determined. I didn't know if it was fixed or variable, seasonal or cyclical, based on visitor volume or lunar phase or something I didn't have a name for. But the number was real. The cabinet tracked it, and when I interfered with one incident, the number didn't change. The mountain just found another way to fill the slot, which meant the cabinet wasn't giving me the power to save lives. It was giving me the power to choose which lives ended, and it was calling that power a gift. I thought about what Virgil had said about stage 3, about the cabinet starting to give instructions. No intervention recommended on some reports, recommended action, intervene on others. I'd assumed those instructions were about the cabinet's limitations. Some incidents could be redirected, others couldn't. The cabinet was being honest about which was which. But sitting on that wall, looking at the mountain, I saw it differently. The instructions weren't about limitations. They were about training. The cabinet was teaching me to sort, teaching me to read a report and decide, based on its notation, whether to act or not, teaching me to defer to its judgment about which deaths were movable and which were fixed, training me to be a better mechanism, a more efficient sorting function, a keeper who didn't waste energy on the cases that couldn't be traded and focused instead on the ones that could. And the cases marked recommended action. Intervene weren't the ones where intervention would save the most lives. They were the ones where intervention would generate the most engagement, the most emotional investment, the most attachment to the system. Save a man from a heart attack. Feel the power. Lose a woman in a ravine. Feel the cost. Keep reading. Keep sorting. Keep choosing. Stay at the station. Stay in the drawer. I drove back to Elk Creek that afternoon and sat on the porch and drank coffee that had gone cold while I was on the parkway, and I made a decision. I would stop reading the reports. Not because I was afraid, because I had finally understood that the reports weren't information, they were a user interface, and I was the user being used. The decision lasted 36 hours. On the morning of October 16th, I walked into the main room, and the bottom drawer was open, and there was a report on the desk, and I read it before I could stop myself. The way you read a text on your phone before your brain catches up with your thumb. Automatic, reflexive, the behavior of a man who has been trained. It described a child, 7 years old, a boy on a family hike, wandering off the trail at a creek crossing while his parents stopped to take photographs. The report said the boy would fall into the creek, which was running high from recent rain, and be carried downstream into a section of rocky rapids. The outcome was listed as drowning. The time was October 28th, 12 days away. I put the report down. I closed the drawer. I went outside and walked to the edge of the clearing and stood in the cold air and told myself I would not go to that creek on October 28th. I would not intervene. I would let the system run its equation without my input, and whatever happened would happen without my fingerprints on it. And then I thought about a 7-year-old boy in a creek, in cold water, in rapids, unable to breathe, and his parents standing on the bank screaming. And I knew that I would be at that creek on October 28th with a throw rope and a flotation device, and I would pull that child out of the water and I would save his life, and someone else's child somewhere else on the mountain would pay for it. The cabinet knew it too. That's why I put the report on the desk instead of in the drawer. That's why it described a child instead of an adult. That's why it gave me 12 days to think about it instead of 2. It was calibrating, learning what motivated me, testing which scenarios produced action and which produced paralysis, building a profile of my decision-making so it could optimize its inputs for maximum engagement. I was being profiled by a filing cabinet, and the profile was accurate. On October 28th, I was at the creek. I had the throw rope. I had the flotation device. The family arrived at the crossing around 2 in the afternoon, a man and a woman and a boy in a red jacket. The boy's name was Noah. He was 7. He was throwing rocks into the creek while his parents took pictures of the waterfall upstream. I intercepted them before the boy could reach the water's edge, told them the creek was running dangerously high, showed them my badge, redirected them to a different trail. The family thanked me and hiked out. Noah waved at me from 20 yards down the trail, a big, full-armed wave, the kind of wave only a kid under 10 gives because they haven't learned to be self-conscious about enthusiasm yet. I waved back. I didn't check the cabinet that night. I didn't check it the next morning. I didn't need to. I knew what was in there. A new report. Same time. Same outcome. Different child. I checked it on October 30th because I'm the kind of person who checks. The kind of person who needs to know the cost even when knowing it is the thing that's killing him. The report was there. A 4-year-old girl. A different creek. A different drainage. Same mountain. Same time. Drowning. Her name was Lily. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not the horror of it. The mechanics. A filing cabinet in a ranger station traded a 7-year-old boy named Noah for a 4-year-old girl named Lily, and I was the one who authorized the transaction by pulling a family off a creek crossing. The cabinet didn't kill Lily. The creek killed Lily. The conditions killed Lily. The same conditions that would have killed Noah if I hadn't been standing there with a throw rope. But the cabinet knew about both children. It knew about both creeks, and it gave me one name so I would save one child so the mountain could take the other. I sat at the desk and cried. First time since I could remember. The tears came up from somewhere below my stomach, from a place I didn't know I still had, and they came in waves that shook my whole body. I put my head down on the desk and I cried until I couldn't breathe, and then I breathed and I cried some more. The station was silent around me. The cabinet was closed. The creek was running outside the window. The mountain was watching. When I stopped crying, I washed my face and looked in the bathroom mirror and saw a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 6 weeks. Red eyes, gray skin, a thinness around the mouth that hadn't been there in September. The mountain was eating me from the inside, one decision at a time, and the filing cabinet was the table setting. That was stage 3. That was the moment the cabinet's instructions stopped being suggestions and started being commands, not because the words on the page changed, but because my ability to refuse them had been ground down to nothing. I would read, I would act, I would carry the cost, and I would keep doing it because the alternative was knowing that a child had drowned while I sat on a porch with my hands in my pockets and a report in a drawer that told me exactly where and when to be. The cabinet had found my price. Everybody has one. For some people it's a spouse, or a parent, or a friend. For me it was a kid in a red jacket throwing rocks into a creek, waving goodbye with both arms. The cabinet tested different scenarios until it found the one I couldn't refuse, and then it filed that information in whatever system it uses to track the keepers it keeps. I was stage 3. And the drawer was already preparing stage 4. Travis came on November 2nd. Right on schedule, every other Thursday, but something about the way he drove in told me this wasn't a routine visit. He just showed up at the station around 10 in the morning, driving fast enough on that dirt road that I heard the gravel pinging off his undercarriage before I saw the truck through the trees. He parked and sat in the cab for a minute. I was on the porch with coffee. He got out and walked up the steps and looked at me the way you look at someone who's been in a fight. "You look like hell," he said. "I haven't been sleeping much. I heard about the Jessup save and the Treon tent pole. District's talking about putting you in for a commendation." "I don't want a commendation." Travis leaned against the porch railing and crossed his arms. "You been reading the reports?" It wasn't a question. I didn't answer it like one. "How much do you know?" I asked. "I know what I told you. Every ranger asks about the cabinet. Most of them start reading. Some of them start acting on what they read, and every single one who acts on them eventually figures out what you figured out. That it trades. That it trades. Yeah, and you didn't tell me that part. Would you have believed me? No, I wouldn't have. I knew that. If Travis had sat on this porch 6 weeks ago and told me that a filing cabinet in a ranger station could predict deaths and that preventing one death caused another, I would have filed him in the same category as the guys in fire camp who claimed to have seen Bigfoot or heard ghost voices on their radios in the mountains. The kind of story you nod at politely and then forget. "I need to talk to Virgil Pruitt," I said. "I know. That's why I'm here early. I'll drive you down." Waynesville was about an hour and a half from the station, down the mountain and west along the interstate toward the Tennessee border. A small town in a valley with a brick downtown and mountains on every side. Travis drove. We didn't talk much on the way down, which was fine. I had gotten used to Travis's brand of silence, the kind that comes from a man who has opinions but understands that some things need to be said by specific people at specific times, and this wasn't his time. Virgil Pruitt lived in a ranch-style house on a dead-end road on the north side of town. The yard was neat. The house was painted yellow with white trim. There was a vegetable garden on the south side that had been put to bed for the winter, the rows covered with straw mulch, the tomato cages stacked against the fence. A Ford pickup sat in the driveway with a Forest Service retirement sticker on the back window. Travis knocked. A dog barked inside. Then the door opened, and I was looking at a man in his mid-70s who had the same look in his eyes that I saw in my mirror every morning since October 12th. Tired. Knowing. The look of someone carrying something they've been carrying too long. "This is Caleb," Travis said. "He's at Elk Creek." Virgil looked at me for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and waved us in. The house was warm and smelled like coffee and wood polish. The dog was a beagle mix, old, mostly deaf, who sniffed my boots and then went back to a dog bed in the corner. Virgil led us to the kitchen, where a pot of coffee was already on. 3 mugs were set out on the counter. "Travis called ahead," Virgil said, catching my look at the mugs. "I've been expecting this visit since August. Figured whoever they put in after Reed would come find me by October. You lasted a bit longer than most." We sat at the kitchen table. Virgil poured coffee. His hands shook slightly, the way old hands do, but his eyes were steady and clear. He looked at me the way a doctor looks at a patient who's described symptoms that confirm a diagnosis. "Tell me what you've seen," he said. I told him. Everything. The reports in the drawer. Gerald Pemberton. The lamp in the drawer opening at night. Wayne Jessup and the AED. Catherine Marsh. The tree. And Dale Redding. The sound of pages turning at 2 in the morning. The metallic smell. The new reports marked "No intervention recommended," and the ones marked "Recommended action, intervene." The feeling of disappointment when I stopped acting on them. Arthur Poole dying on the Ivester Gap Trail, 'cause I chose not to go. Virgil listened to all of it without interrupting. He didn't nod. He didn't react. He just listened, the way people listen when they're hearing their own story told back to them by someone who doesn't know it's the same story. When I finished, he took a slow drink of his coffee and set the mug down. "When did the station start giving you instructions?" he asked. "End of October." The new report started, including lines at the bottom. "No intervention recommended. Then recommended action, intervene, like it's telling me what to do." Virgil nodded. "That's stage 3. There are 5. 5 stages of what?" 5 stages of what happens to the keeper of that station. Every ranger who works Elk Creek long enough goes through them. I went through them. Reed went through them. The 7 or 8 before me went through them. He held up one finger. "Stage 1. You find the reports. You think they're misfiled or somebody's playing a joke. You dismiss them." Second finger. "Stage 2. A report comes true. You can't dismiss it anymore. You start reading every one. You start acting on them. You feel powerful. You feel useful. You feel like you found a purpose." Third finger. "Stage 3. You figure out the trade, one for one. Every save has a cost. You either stop acting and live with the guilt, or you keep acting and live with the knowledge that you're choosing who dies. Either way, the cabinet starts talking to you. Instructions in the reports. New ones appearing faster. The station starts making it clear that it has expectations." Fourth finger. Stage 4. The cabinet writes a report about you. He paused. "What's stage 5? I asked. "Stage 5 is what happens if you're still there when the date on your report comes due." "What happens?" Virgil looked at his coffee. "I don't know. Nobody who reached stage 5 came back to tell me." The kitchen was quiet. The beagle snored in its bed. Travis sat with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. "How long were you at Elk Creek?" I asked. 22 months. Longest of anyone." "How did you get out?" "I stopped reading. Cold. Closed the drawer and didn't open it for 3 weeks. Stayed in the field as much as possible. Slept in my truck some nights instead of the station. Stopped engaging with it entirely. And after about 2 weeks of that, the reports stopped appearing." "They stopped?" "They stopped for me. My replacement found them on his first day. Same handwriting, same accuracy, same everything. The cabinet doesn't stop. It just finds a new reader." "You said it wrote a report about you." Virgil got up from the table and walked to a cabinet in the hallway. "Not a filing cabinet. A wooden china cabinet with glass doors, the kind your grandmother keeps dishes in. He opened the bottom door and pulled out a manila folder, old, yellowed at the edges, soft from handling. He brought it back to the table and set it in front of me. Inside was a single incident report, standard Forest Service form, handwriting that matched what I'd been reading at Elk Creek exactly. Same pen pressure, same letter formation, same careful, deliberate style. The report was dated blank. No month, no day, no year. Just empty space where the date should be. It described the death of Virgil Allen Pruitt, male, 6 feet tall, 172 pounds. The location was the Elk Creek Ranger Station. The cause of death was listed as voluntary entry into the Shining Rock Wilderness, nighttime, no return. The time was listed as pending. "I've had this for 40 years, Virgil said. "Found it in my jacket pocket the day I drove off that mountain. Wasn't there when I put the jacket on that morning. I've checked it every year on the anniversary. The date is still blank. What does that mean? It means I'm not done yet. It means the station filed a report on me and the report is still open, pending, waiting for the date to fill itself in. When does it fill in?" Virgil looked at me with those steady, tired eyes. "When I go back. That's what I believe, anyway. The report stays open as long as I stay away from that mountain. The minute I set foot on that property again, the date fills in and the report closes. That's the deal. That's how you get out. You leave and you never go back. And you live the rest of your life knowing that somewhere in a filing cabinet in an empty ranger station there's a piece of paper with your name on it and a blank space where the date of your death should be. And the station just lets you go? The station doesn't let you do anything. It doesn't force you to stay. It doesn't force you to read. It doesn't force you to act. It just writes reports and puts them in the drawer and waits. If you stop reading, it finds someone else. If you leave, it waits for your replacement. It's been doing this longer than the Forest Service has been managing that land. Longer than the government has existed, probably. What is it?" Virgil shook his head. "I spent 20 years asking that question. Read everything I could find about the Shining Rock area. Cherokee history, settler records, geological surveys, all of it. I can tell you what it isn't. It isn't a ghost. It isn't a demon. It isn't a curse, or a haunting, or anything with a name you'd find in a book. The best I can figure, it's something that was already in that ground before anyone built on it. Something that keeps a record of everything that happens on that mountain, every death, every injury, every loss, going back to before there were records. And when someone builds a structure on its ground and fills it with paperwork, it learns to use the paperwork. It learns to communicate in the language of the thing it's living inside. Filing cabinets, incident reports, government forms, the bureaucracy of death. It adopted our system because our system was there, and now it uses it better than we do." Travis spoke for the first time since we had sat down. "Tell him about 1982. Virgil's face changed. The steadiness was still there, but underneath it something moved, something old and heavy. "In 1982, he said, I found a report in the drawer that described a group of Boy Scouts getting caught in a flash flood on the East Fork Trail. 8 kids, 2 leaders. The report said the water would rise at 3:45 p.m. on July 14th. It described the specific section of trail where the group would be when the water hit. It described 8 fatalities." He stopped, took a breath. "I went. Of course I went. I hiked out there the day before and camped near the trail junction. The next morning I intercepted the group and told them the trail was closed for maintenance. Showed them my badge, my radio, the whole thing. The scoutmaster argued with me for 10 minutes, but eventually he turned the group around and took them on a different trail. And at 3:45 p.m., the flash flood hit that section of trail exactly as described. I was on a ridge above it when it came through. The water was brown and fast and full of debris, trees and rocks and mud, moving at 20 or 30 miles an hour through a channel that had been a calm creek 2 minutes before. If those kids had been on that trail, they would have been dead. All of them. You saved 8 kids. I saved 8 kids. And the next morning, There was a report in the cabinet describing a church van from Greenville rolling off the Blue Ridge Parkway at mile marker 411 at 3:45 p.m. on July 14th. 11 passengers, 8 children, 3 adults, all fatalities. The kitchen went very quiet. 8 children, I said. 8 children, same number, different kids, different families, different van, same time, same mountain, same number. Virgil picked up his coffee mug and held it with both hands, the way you hold something when you need something to hold. I drove to mile marker 411 that afternoon. The guardrail was torn through. The van was at the bottom of a 200-foot embankment. They'd already pulled the bodies out by the time I got there. State police had the road closed. I stood on the shoulder and looked at the hole in the guardrail, and I knew that those 8 children were in that van because 8 other children weren't in that creek. And I knew because the cabinet told me. And I knew because I was the one who put the trade in motion. He set the mug down. That was my last month at Elk Creek. I closed the drawer. I stopped reading. I drove off the mountain in August, and I never went back. 40 years ago. Virgil got up from the table and refilled our coffee. While he was standing at the counter, I noticed something about his kitchen I hadn't seen when we walked in. Above the window, mounted on a small shelf, was a line of objects. Small things. A silver compass with a cracked crystal, a folded bandana, sun-bleached to near white. A fishing lure, the kind you'd use for trout in a mountain stream. A single bootlace, knotted at both ends. A Park Service badge, the enamel worn smooth. What are those? I asked. Virgil set the coffee pot down. He looked at the shelf the way you look at a gravesite, with distance and weight. Those belong to people who didn't come back, not from Elk Creek specifically, from the mountain. People I knew, or knew of, who went into the Shining Rock and never came out. Their families donated them to the district office over the years, and when the office cleaned house, these got thrown in a box for disposal. I pulled them out. Why? Because someone should remember that these were people, not incident numbers, not case files, not entries in a ledger. People with pockets full of things that mattered to them. A compass that pointed north, a lure that caught fish, a bandana that kept the sun off their neck. The mountain took them, but it didn't take these, and as long as these are on my shelf, those people are more than a report in a drawer. He sat back down and wrapped his hands around his mug. That's the thing about the cabinet that nobody tells you, Caleb. It reduces people to data, names, descriptions, incident types, outcomes. The same way you'd catalog inventory or track shipments. The cabinet doesn't know those people. It doesn't know their names mean anything beyond identification codes. It doesn't know that Gerald Pemberton was someone's father, or that Catherine Marsh was someone's teacher, or that the 8 children in that van were someone's entire world. It just processes them, files them, balances the ledger, and we're the ones who add the meaning. We're the ones who suffer because of the meaning. The cabinet doesn't suffer. It doesn't feel guilt or grief or the 3 a.m. paralysis of knowing you chose one name over another. It just files. And that's why it needs keepers. Because filing isn't enough. The system needs someone who cares enough to engage with it, to read the reports, and feel the weight and make the choices. The suffering is the fuel. Without it, the reports are just paper. He looked at the shelf again. I keep those things up there because they remind me that the people in the reports were real. Not data, not variables, not entries in a column. Real. And the day I stop feeling that, the day those objects become just objects, is the day the blank fills in. I looked at the compass, the bandana, the lure, the bootlace, the badge. 5 objects from 5 people who walked into a wilderness and didn't walk out. I tried to imagine the hands that held them. The pockets they sat in. The moments when those objects were the last connection between a person and the world they were leaving. Does it help? I asked. Keeping them? It helps me remember why I left, and it helps me remember why I can't go back, because if I go back, I become another object on someone's shelf, and I owe those people more than that. Travis had been quiet through most of the conversation, but he spoke then. looking at Virgil, not at me. Virgil, tell him about the letters. Virgil shook his head slightly. He needs to know, Travis said. Virgil set down his mug. He went back to the china cabinet and pulled out a second folder, thinner than the first, held together with a rubber band. He set it on the table. After I left Elk Creek in '82, I started getting letters. Not email, not phone calls. Physical letters, mailed to my home address. No return address, no postmark. They just appeared in my mailbox. He opened the folder. Inside were maybe a dozen envelopes, all of them plain white, standard business size, the kind you'd use for utility bills or government correspondence. He pulled one out and slid it across the table to me. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, standard letter paper. The handwriting was the same pen pressure, the same letter formation, the same careful, deliberate hand that had filled every incident report in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet at Elk Creek Station. The letter was short. Virgil, we note your continued absence. Your file remains open. The position has been filled. Your replacement is performing well. We hope you are enjoying your retirement. Please consider returning at your earliest convenience. The drawer is always open. Regards. No signature, no name, no identification of any kind. Just the handwriting and the message and the same faint metallic smell that I could detect even through the envelope. How often? I asked. Once a year. Every year. 40 letters. The wording changes slightly. Sometimes it mentions a new replacement by description. Sometimes it asks about my health. Sometimes it's just one line. Your file remains open. But it comes every year, usually in September, just before the fall posting season starts. It knows your address. It knows everything. It always has. It knew the hiker's name before he arrived on the trail. It knew the weather before the forecast did. It knew the exact minute a man's heart would stop. Why wouldn't it know my address? I put the letter back in the envelope. The metallic smell clung to my fingers. Will I get letters? Probably. Or something else. The cabinet adapts to whatever system is available. Virgil Pruitt gets letters because Virgil Pruitt lives in a house with a mailbox. If you live somewhere without a mailbox, it might use email or texts or something I can't predict. The medium changes. The message doesn't. Your file remains open. Your file remains open. That's all it ever really says. Everything else is dressing. The core message is always the same. We know where you are. We know you're alive. Your report is pending. Come back and close it. I drove back to the station that evening with this sitting in my chest like a stone. The cabinet didn't just keep records of the living. It maintained relationships with them. It wrote letters. It kept track. It waited. And I thought about something Virgil had said that I hadn't processed at the time because there was too much else to process. He'd said his replacement was performing well. The cabinet had mentioned a replacement in one of its letters, which meant the cabinet was evaluating its keepers, rating them, comparing their performance, deciding which ones were performing well and which ones weren't, which meant the cabinet had preferences, it had standards, it had expectations. It wasn't just a record-keeping system, it was a management system, and the keepers weren't users, they were employees. Evaluated, tracked, and replaced when they stopped performing. The filing cabinet was running a department, and we were the staff, 76 now, healthy enough, got a good garden, got the dog, got a life that's small and quiet and mine. And every single morning when I wake up, the first thing I think about is those 8 children in that van. Every morning. 40 years, we sat in that kitchen for another hour. Virgil told me about the other rangers, the ones who had found the reports before him. He'd tracked some of them down over the years, the way I was tracking him down now. Most of them had stories that followed the same pattern. Find the reports, start reading, start acting, learn the cost, stop or don't, leave or don't. 2 of them didn't leave. One was a ranger named Franklin Boggs who worked Elk Creek in 1974. He reached stage 4. The cabinet wrote his report. His date was not blank, it was specific. November 3rd, 1974. The report said he would walk into the Shining Rock Wilderness at 11 p.m. and would not return. On November 3, 1974, Franklin Boggs walked into the Shining Rock Wilderness at 11 p.m. and did not return. Search and rescue never found him. No body, no pack, no trace. Just a empty station with a filing cabinet and a closed report with his name on it. Case status, closed. The other was a ranger named Cora Whitfield, who worked the station in 1988. Same pattern, same stages. Her report was dated March 9th, 1989. Same description. Voluntary entry into the wilderness. Nighttime, no return. On March 9th, 1989, Cora Whitfield walked off the porch of Elk Creek Station at 10:45 p.m. and walked into the trees. The maintenance tech at the time, a man named Gerald who had Travis's job before Travis, found the station empty the next morning. Her coffee was still warm on the desk. The filing cabinet was closed. Her report was inside, dated and completed. Case status, closed. Voluntary, I said. The reports say voluntary. They do. As in, they chose to walk into the woods. That's what the reports say. I've thought about it for 40 years. Whether Franklin and Cora were compelled, whether the station made them do it, or tricked them into it, or whether they actually walked out there on their own because they wanted to. Because by that point they were so deep into the system that leaving felt like dying and staying felt like drowning, and the only option that made any kind of sense was walking into the dark and letting whatever was out there close the file. You think they chose it? I think by stage 5 the difference between choosing and being chosen doesn't exist anymore. We left Waynesville around 3 in the afternoon. Travis drove me back up the mountain. We pulled into the Elk Creek clearing. Just as the last light was draining out of the sky, the ridge line going black against the sky the color of a bruise. Travis killed the engine and looked at the station. Too dark to drive back down on that road, he said. I'll sleep on your floor tonight and head out in the morning. I didn't argue. Part of me was relieved. The idea of being alone in the station that night, after everything Virgil had told us, sat in my stomach like a cold stone. We went inside together. The desk lamp was on. The bottom drawer of the filing cabinet was open about 6 inches. Waiting. Travis stopped in the doorway. He looked at the lamp. He looked at the drawer. He looked at me. Did you leave those on? No. He walked to the cabinet and crouched down so he was eye level with the open drawer. He didn't touch it. He just looked. Then he stood up and pushed the drawer shut with his boot. I've been servicing this station for 12 years, he said. I've never stayed overnight. There's a reason for that. We made dinner. We kept the lights on. Travis laid his sleeping bag on the main room floor near the wood stove, and I went to the bunk room. Around midnight, I heard Travis sit up. Then I heard why. The bottom drawer was sliding open, metal on metal, slow and deliberate, the sound of a drawer being eased open by someone who didn't want to wake the house. Then the pages. That same, slow, careful shuffling, one page at a time. I got up and stood in the bunk room doorway. Travis was sitting on his sleeping bag, flashlight in his hand, beam pointed at the cabinet. The bottom drawer was open. The pages were moving inside it. Not blowing, not shifting from vibration or airflow. Moving with intent, the way pages move when someone is going through them. There was nobody at the cabinet. The room was empty except for us. Travis watched it for a full minute without blinking. The pages turned. The metallic smell filled the room, thick enough to taste. Then the pages stopped. The drawer slid closed on its own, smooth and final. The room went quiet. Travis turned off his flashlight. He lay back down. Neither of us spoke, but I could hear him breathing in the dark, and I knew he was awake for the rest of the night. In the morning, he packed his gear in silence. At the door, he stopped and looked at me. I saw it, he said. I don't know what it was, but I saw it, and I'll be back on the 5th with a plan to get you out of here. Then he drove down the mountain, and I was alone. There was a new report on the desk. Not in the drawer. On the desk, centered, placed deliberately, the way you'd leave a note for someone you expected to come home. The paper was warm. The ink was fresh. I picked it up and read it. It was my report. Caleb James Moran, male, 34, 6 feet 1 inch, 185 pounds. Scar on right forearm from a burn sustained during wildland fire suppression, 2018. Assigned to Elk Creek Ranger Station, September 27, current year. The incident description read, subject will enter the Shining Rock Wilderness on foot via the Elk Creek Trailhead at approximately 11 p.m. Subject will proceed northwest along the drainage for approximately 2.3 miles to the confluence with the Upper Fork. Subject will not return. No recovery attempted. Station reassigned. The date was November 9th. I was holding the report on November 3rd. That gave me 6 days. At the bottom of the report, in the same handwriting that had been filling my filing cabinet for 6 weeks, was a line that none of the other reports had ever included. Keeper rotation complete. Thank you for your service. I put the report down on the desk. I walked to the filing cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. The unlabeled folder was full. I pulled it out and flipped through the pages. There were over 40 reports now, covering dates through the end of November, future incidents, future injuries, future deaths, all mapped, all detailed, all waiting for someone to read them and decide. And underneath the folder, at the very bottom of the drawer, pressed flat against the metal, was another stack of papers, old ones, yellowed. The handwriting was the same, but the ink was faded with age. I pulled them out carefully, the way you handle something fragile, and I began to read. They were reports going back decades, 1968, 1970, 1973, each one in the same handwriting, each one describing an incident that had already occurred. Confirmed, dated, completed, and at the bottom of each completed report was a name, not the name of the person in the incident, the name of the ranger who had been at the station when the report was filed, the keeper, the one who read it and chose. I found Franklin Boggs's name at the bottom of 11 reports from 1974. Completed, closed. I found Cora Whitfield's name at the bottom of 14 reports from 1988 and 89. Completed, closed. I found Virgil Pruitt's name at the bottom of 23 reports spanning 1980 through 82. Some completed, some marked intervention by keeper, substitute filed. The Boy Scout report was there. So was the church van report. Both completed, both with Virgil's name at the bottom. And I found my name at the bottom of 7 reports, the ones I had acted on. Wayne Jessup, the 2 hikers in the tent, the couple on Black Balsam, the hypothermia pair. Noah at the creek crossing. My name was on each one, followed by a notation. Intervention by keeper, substitute filed. My name was on 7 reports, and 7 people had died because I'd intervened. Catherine Marsh, Dale Redding, the man on the porch, Lily, and 3 others whose reports I hadn't even checked because I'd been too busy feeling like a hero to count the cost. I put the papers back. I closed the drawer. I sat at the desk and looked at my own report, centered on the surface like a place setting, and I understood what Virgil had meant about stage 5. About the difference between choosing and being chosen, ceasing to exist, because part of me wanted to walk into those woods, not because the station was compelling me, not because I heard a voice or felt a pull or saw something beckoning me from the tree line, but because after 6 weeks of reading those reports and acting on them and learning what they cost and choosing not to act and learning what that cost too, the idea of walking into the dark and letting the file close felt like the only clean exit from a system that didn't have any clean exits. Franklin Boggs and Cora Whitfield hadn't been tricked. They'd been exhausted, ground down by the mathematics of it, until walking into the woods felt less like dying and more like clocking out at the end of a shift that had gone on too long. I understood that now, and understanding it was the most dangerous thing that had happened to me since I arrived at Elk Creek, because understanding is the last step before acceptance, and acceptance is the last step before you put your boots on at 11 p.m. and walk out the door. November 9th was 6 days away. I had 6 days to decide whether I was Franklin Boggs or Virgil Pruitt. I tried the radio on November 3rd, after the truck failed. It worked, technically. I could transmit. Dispatch could hear me. But every time I tried to request an emergency pickup, the signal degraded. Not static. Not interference. The words themselves seemed to lose their edges, becoming soft and blurred, the way sound goes underwater. Dispatch would ask me to repeat. I'd repeat. They'd say they couldn't copy. I'd try again. The cycle would go on until one of us gave up. I tried my cell phone. No service, which was normal for Elk Creek. But I had gotten a bar or two at certain spots on the trail before, up on the ridgeline where the terrain opened toward the south. I hiked to every one of those spots. No signal at any of them. The phone showed full battery but 0 bars, as if the mountain had pulled a curtain over every cell tower within range. I tried leaving on foot. 12 miles to the nearest paved road. I'd hiked it in 5 hours during my first week at the station, but that was downhill in good weather in September. This was November. The trail was slick, with frozen leaves, the temperature was in the 20s, and the trail kept doing something I couldn't explain. I'd hike for an hour, following the Forest Service road, keeping to the gravel, maintaining my direction by compass, and then I'd come around a curve, and the station would be there, not ahead of me, behind me. I'd been walking away from it for an hour, and it was behind me, which meant I had turned around at some point without noticing, except I hadn't turned around. My compass confirmed my heading. The gravel road doesn't curve back on itself. There are no loops. It's a straight line with switchbacks, heading downhill for 12 miles. You can't accidentally reverse direction on a switchback road and not notice it. I tried 3 times on November 3rd. Each time, after about an hour of hiking, I'd find myself back at the clearing, looking at the station from the parking area, my boots wet and my breath fogging, and the filing cabinet visible through the front window like a face in a frame. The 3rd time I stopped and stood in the parking area and stared at the station and said, out loud, to the building, to the ground, to whatever was listening, let me go. The forest was quiet. The creek ran. A crow called from somewhere on the ridge, a single harsh note that echoed off the rocks and came back sounding like something else, something lower, something that might have been a word. I went back inside. The drawer was open. There were 3 new reports on the desk, not in the folder, laid out side by side like cards in a game I didn't know the rules for. I didn't read them. I swept them off the desk with my forearm, and they scattered across the floor, and I kicked them toward the wall and sat in the chair and put my hands over my face. The reports were back on the desk in the morning, centered, neat, in the same order. On November 4th, I tried something different. I didn't try to leave. Instead, I tried to destroy the cabinet. I went to the utility shed and got the splitting maul. 8 pounds hickory handle, sharp enough to split red oak in one swing. I walked into the station, and I stood in front of the filing cabinet, and I swung the maul at the top drawer. The maul bounced off. Not deflected, not blocked, bounced the way a ball bounces off a wall. The impact traveled up the handle and into my shoulders, and I staggered back and looked at the cabinet. There was no dent, no scratch, no mark of any kind. The gray metal was smooth and unmarked, as if I'd hit nothing. I swung again. Same result. The maul hit the surface and rebounded with a force that almost tore it from my hands. The cabinet didn't move, didn't shift, didn't scratch. I tried the drawers. I pulled them all the way out and slammed them on the floor. They hit the ground and the reports scattered, and I stomped on them and tore them and crumpled them into balls and threw them into the wood stove. The paper wouldn't burn. The stove was hot, coals glowing, draft pulling. I threw the reports in, and they sat on the coals like leaves on water. Untouched, unburned, the ink still legible, the handwriting still precise. After 10 minutes, I pulled them out with the fire tongs. They were warm but undamaged, not even singed. I tried tearing them. The paper tore easily enough. I ripped a report into pieces, confetti-sized, and threw the pieces in the trash can. In the morning, the report was on the desk, whole, unripped, the handwriting uninterrupted. I tried taking them outside. I gathered every report from the drawer and the desk and carried them to the edge of the clearing and threw them into the creek. The current took them. I watched them float downstream, pages spinning in the water, disappearing around the bend. I went back inside. The reports were in the drawer. Every one. Dry, in order, filed. On the afternoon of November 4th, I sat on the porch with the splitting maul across my knees and watched the tree line and tried to think of something I hadn't tried. The station was quiet behind me. The cabinet was patient. It had been patient since 1965. It could be patient for 5 more days. Then I thought about Travis. Travis was coming on November 5th. Travis had a truck. Travis's truck had started that morning, or so I assumed, because Travis had driven it to his other stations before mine. If the mountain was blocking my truck and my radio and my trails, maybe it couldn't block something that hadn't been on the mountain long enough to be claimed. I went inside and picked up the radio. Pisgah Base, Elk Creek, morning check-in, vehicle still inoperative, requesting maintenance visit from Travis Beckley at earliest availability. And the radio worked. Clear signal. No degradation. As if the mountain had been waiting for me to ask for help instead of trying to leave on my own. As if it wanted Travis to come. That thought kept me up most of the night. Was I summoning Travis into a trap? Was the mountain allowing the radio to work because it wanted another person on its ground? Was the report about the vehicle accident on the Forest Service road, the one I hadn't read yet because it hadn't been written yet, already forming in whatever space the reports came from before they appeared on paper? But the alternative was staying alone. And I knew what 6 days alone with the cabinet would do. It would grind me down the way it had ground down Franklin Boggs and Cora Whitfield and whoever came before them. It would fill the drawer with reports, and the reports with names, and the names with faces, until the only face left was mine. And then it would open the door at 11 p.m., and the door would be the only thing that wasn't locked, and the trail would be the only trail that didn't loop back, and the wilderness would be the only direction that moved. Forward. I needed Travis. Even if bringing him here was exactly what the cabinet wanted. So I called for him. And he came. I tried to leave on November 3rd. I woke up at 5 a.m., packed my bag with everything I needed and nothing I didn't, and walked out to my truck. The morning was cold. Frost on the windshield, my breath visible in the headlamp beam. I scraped the ice off the glass with the edge of my sleeve, because I hadn't thought to bring a scraper. The little things fall away when you're trying to outrun something that isn't chasing you. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. Nothing. The engine didn't turn over, didn't click, didn't make a sound. Dead. Not the slow death of a dying battery, where the starter grinds and the engine almost catches. Total silence. As if the truck had never been a machine at all, but was just a shape made of metal sitting in a clearing, pretending to be something that could take me away from here. I popped the hood. Everything looked normal. Battery terminals were clean. Cables were connected. I checked the fuses. All intact. I checked the fuel line, the starter relay, the alternator belt. Everything was where it should be. The truck was mechanically sound. It just wouldn't start. I tried for an hour. Then I sat on the bumper and looked at the station and thought about Virgil telling me that the station doesn't force you to do anything. And I thought about how the distance between doesn't force and doesn't allow is exactly the width of a dead ignition switch. I went back inside. The filing cabinet was closed. The desk was clear. My report was gone from where I'd left it the night before. I opened the bottom drawer. It was there in the folder, filed neatly with the others in chronological order. November 9th, my date. I picked up the radio. Morning check-in. Dispatch answered. Pisgah Base, Elk Creek. Morning check-in. I need to report a vehicle issue. My truck won't start. Copy Elk Creek. What's the problem? Engine won't turn over. No click, no crank, nothing. I've checked the obvious things. Might need a jump or a tow. We can send Travis up. He's not due for maintenance until the 9th, but we can move him up. That would be great. The sooner the better. I'll check his schedule and get back to you. They got back to me an hour later. Travis was booked through the 4th. waterline break at the Cold Mountain Lookout, and a generator failure at the Davidson River Station. He couldn't get to me any earlier than the 5th, which was already the plan. 2 days. I had to wait 2 days. I spent those 2 days doing things I didn't need to do, because doing nothing would have meant sitting in the station with the cabinet and thinking about November 9th. I split firewood until the pile was stacked higher than the porch railing. I cleaned the station from floor to ceiling. I scrubbed the bathroom. I reorganized the top 3 drawers of the filing cabinet, the ones with the real reports, the ones that had normal dates and normal handwriting and normal outcomes. I hiked the near trails, the ones within a mile of the station, staying close enough to keep the building in sight through the trees. I did not open the bottom drawer. I heard it open on its own 3 times during those 2 days. Twice at night, once in the middle of the afternoon, while I was sitting on the porch. The sound was unmistakable. Metal on metal, the slide of the drawer on its tracks, then silence, then the slow shuffle of paper, then the drawer closing again. On the first night, I heard something new. Not pages, not the drawer, a voice. So faint that I wasn't sure it was a voice at all, and not just the creak or the wind finding a frequency that my tired brain interpreted as speech. But it came from the direction of the main room, from the direction of the cabinet, and it said something that might have been a name. Not my name, someone else's. A name I didn't recognize, spoken in a register so low it was more vibration than sound, like a bass note played on a string too thick to vibrate properly. I stayed in the bunk room. I pulled the blanket over my head like a child, which is exactly what I was in that moment. A child hiding from the dark and telling himself that if he couldn't see it, it couldn't see him. The second night was worse. I was lying in the bunk room with my eyes open, listening. The station was quiet. The creek was running. The wind was still. Then I heard footsteps. Not inside the station. Outside, on the porch. Slow, deliberate steps moving from one end of the porch to the other. The boards creaked under the weight. Something was walking back and forth in front of the building, 5 steps one direction, pause, 5 steps back, pacing. I got up and went to the window. Moonlight was bright enough to see the clearing, the truck, the edge of the tree line. The porch was directly below the bunk room window. I couldn't see what was on it without going to the main room and looking out the front windows. I didn't go to the main room. The pacing continued for maybe 20 minutes. Then it stopped. Then I heard the front door. Not opening, not closing. Something touching the front door. The sound of fingertips or knuckles or something I don't want to think about pressing against the wood, testing it, feeling the surface the way you'd feel a wall in the dark to find a doorway. A slow, exploratory touch that moved across the surface of the door from one side to the other, top to bottom, as if whatever was out there was reading the door like Braille. Then the doorknob rattled. Once, gently, not trying to force it, checking to see if it would turn. It was locked. I'd locked it. The rattling stopped. The pacing started again, slower now, one end of the porch to the other. Then it moved off the porch. I heard the footsteps on the gravel of the parking area, moving toward the tree line. Then they stopped. I looked out the bunk room window. Something was standing at the edge of the clearing where the gravel met the trees. It was tall. Not unusually tall. Not monstrously tall. Just taller than a person should be by a few inches, the way a coat on a hook looks taller than the person who wore it because the proportions are wrong. It was dark, or it was wearing dark clothes, or it was made of dark. I couldn't tell where the shape ended and the shadow began. It was facing the station, facing my window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I watched it for as long as I could stand to watch it, which was about 30 seconds, and then I stepped back from the window and sat on the bed, with my hands on my knees and my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth. When I looked again, it was gone. The clearing was empty. The tree line was just trees. In the morning I checked the porch. There were no footprints, no marks on the door, no evidence that anything had been there. The gravel in the parking area was undisturbed. I even checked the frost pattern on the porch boards. because the temperature had been below freezing, and anything walking on frosted wood would have left prints in the ice crystals. The frost was unbroken, perfectly uniform, as if nothing had touched the porch all night. Either I'd imagined it, or whatever had been pacing out there didn't weigh enough to break frost. Travis arrived on November 5th around noon. He pulled into the clearing and got out and went straight to my truck without saying hello. He was all business. Popped the hood, checked the battery, checked the cables, checked the starter. He spent about 45 minutes under the hood and then came to find me on the porch. "There's nothing wrong with your truck," he said. "It won't start." "I know. But there's nothing wrong with it. Everything's connected. Everything's charged. The fuel pump has pressure. The ignition circuit tests clean. It should start. But it doesn't. It doesn't. And mine almost didn't this morning. Engine cranked for a long time before it caught. Never done that before." We looked at each other. "I need to get off this mountain, Travis." "I know you do. Today. I'll drive you. But my truck stays running. I'm not killing the engine until we're on pavement." We went inside so I could grab my bag. I'd already packed it. I just needed to pick it up off the bunk and walk out the door. The filing cabinet was open. The bottom drawer was all the way out, pulled to its full extension on the tracks. The folder was standing upright in the drawer, fanned open, the reports visible. And on top of the reports, laid across them like a bookmark, was a new piece of paper. I should have walked past it. I should have picked up my bag and walked out the door and gotten in Travis's truck and driven down the mountain and never looked back. That's what Virgil would have told me to do. That's what every ranger who ever worked this station and survived would have told me to do. I read it. It was a report dated November 5th, today's date. The incident it described was a vehicle accident on the Forest Service road between Elk Creek Station and the Blue Ridge Parkway. A white Forest Service pickup traveling downhill on the gravel switchbacks would lose traction on a curve at mile marker 7 and roll off the embankment. 2 occupants. The driver would be killed on impact. The passenger would survive with serious injuries, but would be unable to reach help due to the remote location and absence of cell service. Time of incident, 2:37 p.m. It was 12:15. We had 2 hours and 22 minutes. I looked at Travis. "What?" he said. He hadn't seen the report. He was standing by the front door with his keys in his hand, waiting for me. I held up the paper. "It's a report, dated today. It describes your truck going off the road on the way down. You die. I survive, but I'm stuck." Travis's face didn't change. He walked over and took the report from my hand and read it. He read it slowly, moving his lips slightly, the way some people do when they're concentrating. Then he set it back on top of the folder. 2:37, he said. "Yeah, the curve at mile 7. That's the sharp left above the rock cut. That's the one." Travis looked at the cabinet. Then he looked at me. "This is what it does, Caleb. You know that. It gives you information you can act on so you'll stay. If you ignore this and get in my truck, we either die on that curve or we don't, and either way the cabinet wins because you spent 15 minutes deciding instead of walking out the door. Or it's telling the truth and you die on that curve in 2 hours. Then we leave now and we drive slow, and we don't hit that curve at 2:37. We hit it at 2:15 or 2:10 or whenever we get there, and we take it at 5 miles an hour. And if the curve gets us at 2:10 instead of 2:37, what if the time doesn't matter? What if the road itself is the trap?" Travis stood very still for a moment. Then he said something that I think about all the time. "Caleb, if the road is the trap, then staying here is the trap, and the trail is the trap, and there's no way off this mountain that isn't a trap. And if that's true, then I'd rather die in my truck on a road I've driven 1,000 times than stand in this station waiting for November 9th. Wouldn't you?" I picked up my bag. We walked out the door. Travis's truck was running, idling in the clearing, exhaust curling in the cold air. We got in. Travis drove. He took the gravel road slowly, 10 miles an hour through the switchbacks, braking early, keeping the tires on solid ground. The road was in decent condition for November, a little soft in the shaded sections where frost hadn't burned off, but not icy, not muddy, not dangerous by any reasonable standard. We came around curves that I'd driven 50 times without thinking, curves that were just curves, gravel and dirt, and the mountain holding the road up the way it had for decades. We reached mile marker 7 at 1:52 p.m., the sharp left above the rock cut. Travis slowed to a crawl. The curve was tight but not treacherous. The gravel was firm. The embankment on the right dropped maybe 60 feet into a rocky drainage, choked with rhododendron. There was no guardrail. There had never been a guardrail on Forest Service roads in backcountry. You were expected to know how to drive. Travis eased around the curve at maybe 3 miles an hour. The tires held. The truck didn't slip. We cleared the curve and kept going. Mile marker 6, 5, 4. The road gradually improved as we descended, wider, better maintained, fewer switchbacks. At mile marker 2, the gravel gave way to pavement. The Forest Service road connected with a county road that connected with the Blue Ridge Parkway entrance ramp. The moment the tires hit asphalt, the sound changed. That's what I noticed first. The crunch and pop of gravel under rubber replaced by the smooth hiss of tread on blacktop, and with that single shift in frequency, everything else released. The weight lifted. The heaviness I'd been carrying since October, the feeling of being watched, the metallic taste, the constant low-frequency pressure against my eardrums, all of it broke like a fever breaking. My ears popped, my jaw unclenched. The air tasted like air again, not pennies. I took a breath that went all the way to the bottom of my lungs for the first time in weeks. The mountain had stopped at the pavement line. Whatever held that territory, whatever lived in the ground under Elk Creek, and wrote in filing cabinets and turned pages at 2 a.m, it ended where the asphalt began. The boundary was that clean. Gravel on one side, pavement on the other, and a wall between them that I couldn't see but felt in every bone in my body when we crossed it. I looked at Travis. He was gripping the steering wheel with both hands, white-knuckled, staring straight ahead. "You feel that?" I asked. "Yeah." "It stopped." "Yeah." He drove in silence for another mile. Then he pulled into a parkway overlook and put the truck in park and sat there with the engine running and his hands still on the wheel. "I've been driving that road for 12 years, he said. "Every 2 weeks, up and down, summer and winter, rain and snow. 12 years. I've never once been afraid of that road." He looked at me. I was afraid of it today. The whole way down. Not because of the report, because of the way the road felt. Like it was thinking about it, like it was deciding whether to let us through. We sat in the overlook for 10 minutes. The parkway stretched north and south along the ridgeline, smooth and gray and ordinary. Cars passed in both directions. A family was parked at the far end of the overlook, taking photos of the view. A man in a fleece jacket was eating a sandwich behind the wheel of a Subaru. Normal people in a normal world doing normal things. "What now?" Travis asked. "I need to go to the district office. I need to talk to Denise." "And tell her what?" "That I'm done. That the posting isn't a good fit." Travis almost smiled. That's what Reed said. Reed was right. Travis put the truck in gear and pulled onto the parkway, heading south toward Brevard. We'd gone about 2 miles when I remembered the report on the desk. The one dated November 5th. The one describing Travis's truck going off the road at mile marker 7 at 2:37 p.m. I checked the time. 2:41 p.m. We'd cleared the curve at 1:52. 49 minutes before the report said we'd crash. We'd driven slow and careful, and we'd made it. The report had been wrong. Or we'd changed the outcome by leaving early. Or the mountain had let us go. And then the thought I didn't want to have, the one that had been following me since October 12th, like a footstep matching mine. If the report was an invoice, and we'd voided it by not being on that road at 2:37, was there a substitute? Was there another vehicle on that road right now, coming up or going down, about to hit that curve at the wrong speed? Had the mountain issued a replacement? I looked at Travis. He was watching the road with the focus of a man who was trying very hard not to think about the same thing I was thinking about. We didn't talk about it. We drove to Brevard. We didn't check the news later. We didn't call the district to ask if anyone had reported an accident on the Elk Creek Road. We didn't look, 'cause looking would mean knowing, and knowing was the thing the cabinet fed on. Sometimes not knowing is the only power you have left. The district office was a single-story building on a side street in Brevard, shared with the Ranger District administrative staff and a few seasonal employees who were wrapping up fall projects. It smelled like carpet and coffee and photocopier toner, normal office smells. I sat in a chair across from Denise Farrow's desk and told her I was leaving the posting. She didn't look surprised. She looked tired. How far did it get? She asked. Stage 4. She closed her eyes. Did it give you a date? November 9th. 4 days from now. 3 if you don't count today. She opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Not pity. Not concern. Something closer to grief. The way you look at someone who's been through something you know about but couldn't prevent. Reed left at stage 3, she said. He never got to 4. He found the reports, he read them, he figured out the trade, and he left. He was smart about it. You weren't. I saved people. You move people. There's a difference. I didn't argue. She was right. The station needs to be decommissioned, I said. It's been decommissioned 3 times, 1983, 1990, and 2009. Each time the cabinet is empty when the crew arrives. No reports, no folder. Nothing unusual. The building gets boarded up or torn down, and within 5 years, something gets built on the same spot. A new station or a trail shelter or a storage building. And the cabinet ends up inside it. Not the same cabinet, a different one, but the same system, same drawer, same reports, same handwriting. You've known about this the whole time. I've known about it for 20 years, since I took over this district. The previous district ranger told me he'd known since the 70s. There's an informal file in the regional office. Unofficial. No incident number, no case number, just a folder with notes from every district ranger who's managed Pisgah since 1968. It's passed from one to the next when they retire or transfer. Off the books. And you keep sending people up there. The Forest Service requires a ranger presence in the Shining Rock Wilderness during the operational season. I can't close a station without a reason I can put in a report. And I can't put this in a report. 2 people have died up there that you know of. 2 rangers have walked into the wilderness and not returned. Dozens of others have left the posting with stories I can't verify and experiences I can't explain. And every single substitute death described in those reports matches a real fatality in the public record. Everyone. I've checked. She pulled open her desk drawer and took out a folder. Not a manila government folder. A plain blue folder. The kind you buy at an office supply store. She set it on the desk between us. This is the informal file. Everything we know. Notes from 6 district rangers going back to 1968. If you want to read it, you can. If you don't, I understand. I took the folder. I put it in my bag. You're off the posting as of today, Denise said. I'll send a crew up to collect your personal effects and secure the station. Nobody goes inside. They pack what's on the porch and in the shed and they leave. I'll process your transfer to another district. The cabinet will be empty when they get there. I know. And you'll post someone else next fall. She didn't answer that. She just looked at me with that tired, grieving expression and said, Go get some sleep, Caleb. You look like you haven't slept in a week. She was right about that, too. I checked into a motel on the edge of Brevard. A day's inn with a parking lot and a vending machine and thin walls, and the most beautiful, ordinary, mundane interior I'd ever seen in my life. I sat on the bed with my boots on and my bag beside me, and I breathed. Just breathed. The air smelled like laundry detergent and carpet shampoo and nothing else. No metal, no old paper, no cold air from a station that had been holding something for 60 years. I showered. I ate a gas station sandwich. I lay on the bed with the television on, not watching it, just letting the noise fill the room the way noise fills a room when there's nothing hiding inside it. Sports highlights, a car commercial, the weather forecast for western North Carolina. Clear skies through the weekend, cold overnight lows, a nice week ahead. I should have slept. I didn't. I opened the blue folder. The notes inside spanned decades. Handwritten, typed, printed. Some were formal, written in the careful language of government employees covering themselves. Others were raw, scribbled, the kind of thing you write at 3 a.m. when you need to put something on paper before it eats you alive. The earliest note was from 1968, a district ranger named Harold Wentz, writing about a conversation with the first ranger assigned to Elk Creek after the station was built in 1965. The ranger had reported finding predated incident forms in the filing cabinet that corresponded with subsequent events. Wentz had investigated, found no evidence of fraud or fabrication, and noted the situation as unexplained but not actionable. The 1972 entry was from a ranger named Douglas Kidd who had replaced Wentz. Kidd's note was longer and more agitated. He described visiting Elk Creek after 2 consecutive rangers had left mid-posting with psychological complaints and finding the filing cabinet in question. He opened the bottom drawer and found it empty. He wrote, "The cabinet was cold to the touch, despite the station being heated. The interior of the bottom drawer smelled strongly of metal and old paper. I found nothing inside. However, upon returning to my vehicle, I discovered a single incident report form on the passenger seat of my truck. The form was blank, except for the date field, which read pending. I destroyed the form." The 1974 entry described Franklin Boggs's disappearance. Dry, factual, almost clinical. Missing person report filed. Search conducted. No recovery. Station secured. Filing cabinet inspected and found empty. A handwritten note at the bottom, not part of the official entry, read, "The cabinet was not empty when I checked it on Tuesday. It was empty when the search team arrived on Thursday, 2 days. Something moved those files between Tuesday and Thursday. I don't know what, and I'm not going to speculate in writing." I read the whole folder. 2 hours. The pattern repeated with the regularity of a heartbeat. New ranger. Reports appear. Ranger reads. Ranger acts. Ranger learns. Ranger leaves. Or doesn't. New ranger. The cycle was mechanical. Reliable. Patient. Whatever occupied Elk Creek Station had been running the system for at least 60 years, and based on Virgil's research into the area's history, probably much longer. The filing cabinet was just the most recent interface. Before that, it might have been something else. Ledger books, census rolls, Cherokee record-keeping systems that the colonists never understood. The thing in the ground adapted to whatever record-keeping technology was present. It learned the language of whoever built on its territory, and it used that language to do what it had always done: keep count. I closed the folder around midnight and set it on the nightstand. I turned off the television. I lay in the dark in a motel room 30 miles from the mountain and listened to the ice machine humming in the hallway and a couple arguing 2 rooms over and the highway traffic on the bypass outside the window. Human sounds, ugly, ordinary, beautiful human sounds. And beneath them, so faint I might have been imagining it, so quiet it might have been the blood in my own ears, or the air conditioner cycling, or the last residual vibration of a nervous system that had been running on adrenaline for 6 weeks. I heard paper. 1 page turning, then another, not in the room, not close, far away and getting farther, like a radio signal fading as you drive out of range. I pulled the blankets up and closed my eyes. That first night in the motel I dreamed about the station. Not a nightmare. Something worse. A calm dream. A quiet dream. I was sitting at the desk at Elk Creek with the wood stove going and the coffee on and the bottom drawer open, and I was reading reports. In the dream, the reading felt normal, routine. The way brushing your teeth feels routine. I'd pull a report, read it, file it, pull another. The handwriting was familiar. The format was familiar. Everything was in order. Everything was where it should be. And in the dream I was happy. Not excited. Not thrilled. Not the adrenaline rush of pulling someone off a ridge before the report came true. Just happy, content. The deep, settled contentment of a person doing exactly what they were made to do. I was the keeper of the station. The station was the keeper of the records. The records were the keeper of the mountain. And the mountain was old and vast and patient, and it held everything that had ever walked on its slopes in a ledger that would never be lost. I woke from that dream at 4 a.m, and I sat on the edge of the motel bed with my heart hammering, and I understood the last thing Virgil had tried to tell me, the thing he'd called nostalgia. It wasn't nostalgia for the power, it wasn't nostalgia for the knowledge, it was nostalgia for belonging, for being part of a system that was older and larger and more permanent than anything else I would ever be part of. The Forest Service was 100 years old. The military was 250. The mountain was eternal. And the filing cabinet was the mountain's interface with the world, and I had been its operator. And for 6 weeks, I had mattered to something that would still be keeping records long after the government collapsed and the trails grew over, and the last human being walked off the last ridge for the last time. The cabinet offered permanence. That's the bait at the center of the snare. Not information, not power, permanence. The chance to be part of something that never ends. And the price of permanence is walking into the woods at 11 p.m. and becoming a line item in a report that will be filed and kept and maintained forever. Your name in a drawer, your data in a column, your life reduced to an incident number written entirely in words. But kept, recorded, permanent. That's why Franklin Boggs walked. That's why Cora Whitfield walked. That's why I suspect Denise Farrow walked. Not because the cabinet made them. Because the cabinet offered them the one thing that no person, no institution, no system in the human world can offer. It offered them a place in the record that would never be erased. And some nights, lying in a motel room in Brevard or an apartment on the Outer Banks or wherever I end up next, I understand the appeal. I understand it the way an addict understands the appeal of the substance they've quit, not with desire, with recognition. The knowledge that the thing that nearly destroyed you is the thing you understood best, and that understanding it is the thread that connects you to it, and that the thread can be followed in either direction, toward the coast or toward the mountain. I've been following it toward the coast for 10 months. The thread gets thinner with distance and time and salt air and the sound of waves that have nothing to do with mountains or filing cabinets or incident reports. But it doesn't break. I don't think it can break. I think it's made of the same material as the paper in my pocket, which is itself made of the same material as the mountain, which has been keeping records since before paper existed. The thread is permanent, and so is the report. My file remains open. In the morning I check my bag. I checked every pocket, every fold, every compartment where a piece of paper could be tucked or folded or slipped without me noticing. I found it in the inside pocket of my jacket, the one I had been wearing when I left the station. Folded once, creased sharp, tucked against the lining. My report. Same form, same handwriting, same details. Caleb James Moran. The Shining Rock Wilderness. No return. But the date had changed. It no longer said November 9th. The date field was blank, empty, just like Virgil's. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and held the report, and I understood. The station had let me go. Not because I'd earned it or beaten it or outsmarted it, because I'd stopped reading. I'd walked away from the drawer, and when I walked away, the station did what it always does. It filed my report as pending and started looking for the next keeper. The date was blank because I wasn't at the station anymore. As long as I stayed away, the date would stay blank. The report would stay open, pending, unresolved. A file that could never be closed as long as I never went back. But it would be there, in a cabinet, in a station that might be torn down and rebuilt and torn down again. In whatever form the thing in the ground chose to keep its records. My name, my description, my incident, pending, waiting for the day I was stupid enough or tired enough or broken enough to drive up that gravel road and walk through that door and open that drawer. Then the date would fill in. and the file would close. I stayed in Brevard for 3 days. Denise processed my transfer papers and told me there was an opening at a coastal station in the Outer Banks, Cape Hatteras National Seashore, which was about as far from the Blue Ridge as you could get without leaving North Carolina. Flat ground, salt air, sand, no mountains, no filing cabinets and backcountry stations, no hemlock forests that held things in their root systems like teeth holding a nerve. I said yes. Before I left, I drove to Waynesville one more time. I owed Virgil that much. He answered the door before I knocked, which I'd stopped finding strange. The beagle was at his feet. The coffee was already on. We sat at the kitchen table and I told him everything. The reports I'd acted on, the substitutions, the porch, the thing at the tree line, the truck that wouldn't start, the escape with Travis, the report in my jacket, the blank date. Virgil listened the way he always listened, patient, still. When I finished, he got up and went to the china cabinet and brought back his own report. He unfolded it on the table next to mine. Same form. Same handwriting. Same blank date field. 2 open files. 2 pending cases. 2 men sitting in a kitchen in Waynesville drinking coffee and carrying pieces of paper that described their deaths in terms that were complete in every detail except the one that mattered. Does it get easier? I asked. No. Does it fade? The feeling fades. The knowledge doesn't. I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is that cabinet. Then I think about the van. Then I think about the 8 kids who lived because of me and the 8 who died because of me. And I try to figure out whether the math adds up to 0 or to something worse than 0, and I never get an answer. What do you do with that? Virgil looked out the window. His garden was bare. The mountains behind it were brown and gray, stripped by November, holding nothing but their own bones. I grow tomatoes, he said. I walk the dog. I keep my hands busy, and I don't go near that mountain, and I don't read anything I haven't written myself. And every night before I go to sleep, I check my jacket pockets, because sometimes I think the report has changed. It hasn't, but I check anyway. He paused. You'll do the same thing. Whatever your version of tomatoes is. You'll find something to fill the space where the reports used to be, and you'll hold on to it because it's the only thing that keeps the space from filling with something else. I asked him if he'd ever considered going back, not to the station, just to the mountain, to the Shining Rock Wilderness, to the trails he'd walked when he was a young ranger who thought the cabinet was a tool and not a trap. He shook his head once, slowly, the way you shake your head when the answer costs something to say. Every day. That's the part nobody tells you. The part that's worse than the guilt and the nightmares and the weight of the paper in your pocket. The part that's worse than all of it is that you miss it. You miss the knowing. You miss opening the drawer and having the next 2 weeks laid out in front of you, every incident, every outcome, every life hanging in the balance. You miss the feeling of being the only person who knows what's coming. You miss the power of it even after you've seen what it costs, especially after you've seen what it costs. Because the cost is what makes it feel real. He looked at me. That's what the station banks on. Not fear, not compulsion, nostalgia. The day you start missing the cabinet is the day you start driving toward the mountain. And the day you reach the station is the day the blank fills in. I left Waynesville that afternoon. I shook Virgil's hand at the door, and the beagle licked my boot, and I drove east toward the coast with my windows down, even though it was 40 degrees, because I needed to feel the air change. I needed to feel the mountains flatten out, and the humidity rise, and the salt start to edge into the wind. By the time I reached the Outer Banks, 11 hours later, the air tasted like ocean. I pulled into the Cape Hatteras Ranger Station parking lot at 2 in the morning and sat in my truck and listened to the surf. Waves breaking on sand, no creek, no hemlock, no metal. I slept for 11 hours, the longest I'd slept since September. That should be where the story ends. I know that's where you want it to end. The ranger drives away. He takes a coastal posting. He leaves the mountain behind. The filing cabinet sits in an empty station and waits for the next keeper, and the whole cycle starts over, but not with him. He's out. He got away. He's the one who drove down the gravel road and lived to talk about it. But I need to tell you what happened next, because it's the part that matters. Denise sent a 4-person crew up to Elk Creek on November 6th, the day after Travis and I left. Their job was simple: retrieve my personal effects from the station, secure the building, lock the doors, board the windows, post-closure notices at the trailheads, standard decommission protocol. They called Denise from the station at 10 in the morning. Everything was normal. The station was clean. My personal effects were boxed and ready to load. There was no unusual smell, no unusual sounds, no unusual anything. One of the crew members, a seasonal named Kyle Fenton, opened the filing cabinet to check for any documents that needed to be archived. The top 3 drawers were full of standard reports: trail conditions, wildlife observations, weather data, visitor contacts, everything in order, everything normal. The bottom drawer was empty. Kyle reported this to the crew leader, who reported it to Denise. Denise told them to close the drawer, lock the cabinet, and leave. They did. They loaded my boxes onto a truck, boarded the windows, locked the doors, and drove down the mountain. Total time on site, 90 minutes. No incidents. Denise called me at the Outer Banks station that evening. The cabinet was empty, she said. Bottom drawer, clean. No folder, no reports, nothing. Of course it was. Kyle said the drawer was cold, said it felt like opening a freezer. Did he read anything? There was nothing to read. The drawer was empty. Good. Tell him to forget about it. Tell all of them to forget about it. I will. But Caleb, there's something else. Kyle said that when he closed the drawer, he heard something inside the cabinet, like paper settling, but the drawer was empty. He opened it again. Still empty. But the sound continued for a few seconds after he opened it, like pages being shuffled somewhere deeper inside the cabinet than the drawer should go. I didn't say anything. I'm decommissioning the station, Denise said. Full demolition. I'll file it as structural deterioration. The roof trusses are old enough to justify it. It won't matter. I know. But I have to do something. I can't keep sending people up there. You'll send someone. Or your replacement will. The Forest Service requires a presence in the wilderness. You said that yourself. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her office, the hum of the copier, someone laughing in the hallway, a phone ringing in another room. What are we supposed to do, Caleb? There's something in the ground on that mountain that's been keeping records since before we got here. It uses whatever we build. It adapts to whatever system we bring. If we tear down the station and build a trail shelter, it'll use the shelter. If we put up a kiosk with a comments box, it'll use the comments box. It doesn't need a filing cabinet. It just needs paper and a drawer and someone willing to read. Then don't build anything. There are 40 miles of trail in that wilderness. Hikers use them year-round. Someone has to maintain them. Someone has to patrol them. Someone has to be there when a man has a heart attack on a ridge or a woman falls into a ravine. That's the job. That's what we do. I heard it in her voice. The same thing Virgil had described, the pull. Not toward the cabinet specifically, but toward the purpose it provided. The feeling that the work mattered more because of the knowledge. That being a ranger in a wilderness where something kept count was more meaningful than being a ranger in a wilderness where things just happened at random. Denise. What? You've been reading the informal file for 20 years. Silence. Have you ever been to the station? A longer silence. Once. In 2009. During the last decommission, I went up with the crew. I opened the cabinet myself. Was it empty? The bottom drawer was empty. But there was a report on the desk. Centered. Like someone had left it there for me to find. What did it say? It had my name on it, my description, my incident. What was the date? Blank. I closed my eyes. You took it with you, I said. It was in my coat pocket when I got back to Brevard. I didn't put it there. Where is it now? In the blue folder, at the bottom, under all the other notes. The blue folder I'd read in the motel, the one I had spent 2 hours going through page by page. I hadn't found her report, but I also hadn't checked the very bottom of the folder, underneath the last page. I'd read the notes and closed the folder and set it on the nightstand. How many open files are there, Denise? I don't know. Virgil has one. You have one. I have one. Reed probably has one, wherever he is. Every ranger who lasted long enough to reach stage 4 and walked away has one. And every single one of them is blank, pending, waiting. For what? For us to go back. I sat with that for a while. On the other end of the line, Denise sat with it too. Two people connected by a phone line in a mountain and a filing cabinet, and the knowledge that somewhere on that mountain, in a building that might be standing or might be torn down or might be rebuilt, there was a drawer with their names in it. Open cases, pending, patient. Destroy the station, I said. Tear it down, burn the lumber, pour concrete over the foundation. It won't stop it, but it'll slow it down, make it harder. Make it have to start over with whatever gets built next. I will. And Denise? Yeah? Don't go up there yourself. Send the crew. Stay in Brevard. Stay on this side of the pavement. She didn't answer. She just said goodnight and hung up. I worked the Outer Banks posting for 7 months. It was everything Elk Creek wasn't. Flat, open, bright. The biggest danger was rip currents and sunburn, and the occasional nor'easter that blew sand across the highway. I walked the beach. I checked turtle nesting sites. I talked to fishermen and surfers and families on vacation, and I slept through the night most nights, and when I didn't, it was because of the wind, not because of paper. I didn't open the filing cabinets at Cape Hatteras. There were several. In the ranger station, and in the maintenance building, and in the visitor center. Standard government issue. Gray metal. 4 drawers. I walked past them every day and I never opened a single one. I kept my report in a lockbox in my truck. I checked it every Sunday morning, the way Virgil checked his. The date was always blank. The handwriting never changed. The paper never aged. In June, I heard from Travis. He called me on a Saturday afternoon from his truck, parked at an overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway. They tore down the station, he said. Crew came up last week, demolished the building, hauled the lumber out, poured a concrete cap over the foundation. Took them 2 days. The cabinet? The cabinet was gone when they got there. The building was empty. They had locked it and boarded it in November, and when they pulled the boards off, everything was gone. Not just the cabinet. The desk, the chairs, the shelving, the stove, the bunk, everything. Just an empty shell. Where did it go? Nobody knows. The locks were intact, the boards were in place, no signs of entry, but the building was stripped clean like a bone in the desert. I thought about that for a while. A building stripped of its contents between November and June. 6 months. Locked and boarded with no signs of forced entry. Everything gone, including a 4-drawer filing cabinet made of steel that weighed at least 100 pounds empty. Travis? Yeah? Has anyone built anything on that site since the demolition? A pause. There's been talk about putting a trail shelter at the Elk Creek trailhead. The wilderness plan calls for a new facility to replace the station. It's in the capital budget for next year. A shelter. Yeah. Open air. 3 walls and a roof, like the AT shelters. Will it have a register box? All the wilderness shelters have register boxes. Trail register. Sign in, sign out, standard paper log. I didn't need to say what we were both thinking. A register box is a box with paper in it, a place where people write things down. A record-keeping system in a structure built on the same ground where a filing cabinet spent 60 years writing the future in neat, careful handwriting. Travis, don't let them build it. I'm a maintenance tech, Caleb. I don't make planning decisions. Then tell Denise. Tell her what it means. Denise retired. I felt the floor shift. Not literally, but the sensation of something settling into place, the way a trap settles when the weight triggers it. When? 2 weeks ago. New district ranger starts in July. Name's Holloway. From the regional office. Never worked Pisgah before. Does Holloway know about the informal file? I don't know. Denise was supposed to brief him. I don't know if she did. Where's Denise now? I heard she's traveling. Said she needed to get away for a while. Left her house keys with a neighbor and said she'd be back by fall. I thanked Travis and hung up. I sat in my truck in the Cape Hatteras parking lot and listened to the waves and thought about Denise Farrow, who had been carrying a blank report in a blue folder for 14 years. and who had just retired and driven away from her desk for the last time, and who was now traveling somewhere I didn't know. I thought about Virgil's words. The day you start missing the cabinet is the day you start driving toward the mountain. I called Virgil. He answered on the third ring. Caleb, have you heard from Denise Farrow? A pause. No. Why? She retired. She's traveling. Nobody knows where. Another pause. Longer. When did she retire? 2 weeks ago. Has anyone checked the mountain? I felt cold. Not the ocean cold of the Outer Banks wind. A different cold. The cold of a filing cabinet drawer that's been closed too long. I'll call the district, I said. Don't go up there yourself. I know. Caleb, I mean it. Don't go up there. I know, Virgil. I called the Pisgah district office and asked for the new district ranger. Holloway wasn't in yet. He started in 2 weeks. I asked for Travis. Travis was in the field. I left a message. Travis called me back that evening. I need you to drive up to the Elk Creek site, I said. Not inside the foundation. Not on the concrete. Just close enough to see if anything's changed. Caleb, just look, Travis, from the road. You don't have to get out of the truck. He went the next morning. He called me from the overlook on the parkway, the same overlook where he'd parked after we escaped in November. The concrete cap is intact, he said. No new construction. The clearing is growing in. Grass and weeds in the parking area. The creek's still running. Is there anything on the concrete? Silence. Travis, there's a chair. A desk chair. The kind you'd find in a ranger station. It's sitting on the concrete pad centered facing the clearing, and there's something on the seat. What is it? Paper. A stack of paper. I can see it from the road. Looks like about 20 or 30 sheets. They're held down by a rock. Can you read them from the road? Not from here. I'd have to walk up. Don't walk up. I wasn't going to. Travis, does the chair look like the one from Elk Creek? It looks exactly like the one from Elk Creek. Is there anything else? A cabinet? Anything metal? No. Just the chair and the paper and the rock. I told Travis to leave. He left. I sat in my truck with the phone in my lap and thought about 20 or 30 sheets of paper sitting on a desk chair on a concrete pad in a clearing in the mountains, held down by a rock, waiting for someone to walk up and read them. That was 10 months ago. I'm still at Cape Hatteras. Virgil is still in Waynesville. Travis is still running his maintenance route, but he doesn't service anything at Elk Creek because there's nothing at Elk Creek to service anymore. Just a concrete pad and a chair and a stack of paper that I assume is still there, getting rained on and dried out and rained on again, unless someone has read them by now. I haven't heard from Denise. I've checked. Her house in Brevard is still empty. Her neighbor says she hasn't called. Her retirement paperwork lists no forwarding address. Her personnel file shows her last known vehicle as a green Subaru Outback. Nobody has reported it seen. I checked the missing persons reports for the western North Carolina region for the past 6 months. I don't know why I checked. I knew what I'd find. I found it. In June, a woman matching Denise's general description was reported missing by a hiking partner who said they'd been doing a day hike near Shining Rock. The partner said the woman had walked ahead on the trail and never come back. The partner described the woman as calm, focused, like she knew where she was going. Search and rescue covered the area for 4 days. They found a green Subaru Outback parked at the trailhead. They found a day pack hanging from a tree branch near the Elk Creek drainage. They found footprints leading from the old station site into the wilderness, heading northwest along the drainage toward the Upper Fork. The footprints ended at the confluence, about 2 1/3 miles from the concrete pad, at the exact coordinates listed on my report and, I assume, on hers. They didn't find her. I checked my report that night, pulled it out of the lockbox with hands that shook for the first time since I'd left the mountain. I unfolded it and read the date field. Blank, still pending, still waiting. I folded it and put it back. I locked the box. I went inside the Cape Hatteras station and made coffee and sat at a desk that held nothing more dangerous than a laptop and a mug and a phone charger. The new district ranger, Holloway, posted the ranger position for the Shining Rock Wilderness in September. The listing described a solo backcountry posting at a newly constructed trail shelter in the Elk Creek area. Winter season, October through March. The position included a small field office with standard filing and communication equipment. Standard filing equipment, a desk and a chair and a cabinet. I called Holloway. He didn't know about the informal file. Denise hadn't briefed him. She'd retired before the transition. I tried to explain what was up there, what the station did, what the cabinet was. He was polite, professional. He thanked me for my concern and said he'd look into the history of the posting and get back to me. He didn't get back to me. Someone applied for the position. Someone always applies. The Forest Service doesn't have trouble filling backcountry postings. There's always a person out there who wants to be alone in the mountains for 6 months, who thinks the quiet will fix whatever's broken in them, who sees a remote posting as a fresh start. That's the profile. That's always the profile. That's who the mountain picks. I don't know who the new ranger is. I don't know if they've found the reports yet. I don't know if the cabinet is in the new shelter or if it's something else now, a register box, a field desk, a footlocker. I don't know if the handwriting is the same or if it's adapted to a new form. I don't know if the new ranger is at stage 1 or stage 2 or further, and I don't know if anyone has told them what's coming. But I know the system is running. I know because I check my report every Sunday, and 3 weeks ago, for the first time since I left the mountain, something had changed. Not the date. The date was still blank, but at the bottom of the report, below the line that read, "Keeper rotation complete. Thank you for your service," there was a new line. Same handwriting, fresh ink. Position filled. New keeper assigned. Your file remains open. The cabinet knows I'm still alive. It knows where I am, not because it can see me or track me or reach me, but because the report exists, and the report is a connection, a thread between me and the ground I stood on, and as long as the paper holds together, the thread holds. I can feel it sometimes. Not the pull Virgil described, not the nostalgia or the longing, something quieter, a low hum in the back of my skull when I'm falling asleep, like a radio signal from very far away, carrying information I can't quite decode. I don't try to decode it. I don't lean into it. I let it pass through me the way wind passes through a screen, carrying whatever it carries without catching. But it's there. And some nights, when the ocean is quiet, and the station is dark, and the only sound is the lighthouse beam sweeping the dunes every 14 seconds, I think about a chair on a concrete pad in a clearing in the mountains, and a stack of paper held down by a rock, and I wonder if the pages are blank now or full. I wonder if the new keeper has opened the drawer yet. I wonder if they've saved anyone. I wonder if someone else has died because of it. I wonder if I'll wake up one morning and the date on my report won't be blank anymore. I'm telling you this because Virgil told me, and Denise told Virgil, and the ranger before her told her, and the chain goes back 60 years, probably longer. Probably back to before there were rangers and filing cabinets and incident report forms, back to when the keeping of records was done in ways we don't have words for anymore. The mountain keeps count. It always has. It tracks every life that enters its territory and every death that occurs on its ground, and it writes it all down in whatever system is available. And it has been doing this with a patience and a precision that makes our best record keeping look like crayon on a napkin. And it uses people, not violently, not forcefully. It uses them the way you use a tool you need but don't respect. It gives them knowledge and watches what they do with it. It lets them feel powerful and purposeful and essential, and then it shows them the cost, and it waits to see if the cost makes them stop or makes them stay. Most of them stop. Most of them drive down the mountain and take a coastal posting and check their pockets every Sunday and live the rest of their lives carrying a piece of paper with a blank date on it. Some of them don't stop. Some of them reach stage 5. Some of them walk into the wilderness at 11 p.m. and don't come back. I don't know what's out there. I don't know what lives in the ground under the Elk Creek drainage, or what it looks like, or what it wants. I don't know if it's alive in any way we'd recognize, or if it's something older than alive, something that existed before the concept of alive had meaning. I don't know if the reports are genuine warnings from something that cares about the people on its mountain, or bait from something that feeds on the decisions they make, or both, or neither, or something I don't have the framework to understand. I know it keeps records. I know the records are accurate. I know that every death on that mountain is accounted for, and balanced, and filed, and that the filing system has been running longer than any government, or religion, or language that currently exists on this planet. And I know that somewhere in the Shining Rock Wilderness tonight, there's a ranger sitting in a station that was built on the same ground as the one before it, and the one before that, and the one before that. And there is a filing cabinet behind the desk, and the bottom drawer holds a folder with no label and no date range. And inside the folder are incident reports dated in the future, written in handwriting that doesn't belong to anyone alive, describing things that haven't happened yet with an accuracy that makes your chest hurt. And the ranger is reading them, and the cabinet is waiting. The crew from the Pisgah District Office filed an administrative closure for Elk Creek Station under incident number Alpha Foxtrot 7724, Pisgah National Forest, Resource Management Division. The official cause was listed as structural deterioration of the original facility. No mention of the filing cabinet, no mention of the reports, no mention of the 7 rangers who left, or the 2 who didn't, or the 1 district ranger who walked into the wilderness in June and never came back. The informal file has been passed to someone. I don't know who. The chain continues. My report is in a lockbox in my truck. Virgil's is in a china cabinet in his kitchen. Denise's is wherever Denise is. The dates are blank for now. If you work for the Forest Service, or if you're thinking about working for the Forest Service, or if you ever take a backcountry posting at a station you've never heard of in a district nobody talks about, check the filing cabinet before you unpack your bag. Open every drawer, read every document, and if you find a folder in the bottom drawer with no label and no date range, and the reports inside have dates that haven't happened yet, in handwriting you don't recognize, describing people you haven't met, doing things they haven't done, close the drawer, lock it if you can, walk out the door, get in your vehicle, drive to the nearest paved road, and keep driving until the mountains are behind you and the air doesn't taste like metal anymore. Don't read them. Don't act on them. Don't try to help, because the thing on the ground doesn't need your help. It needs your name at the bottom of a report. And once it has that, it has the rest of you. The only question is whether you walk out on your own terms, or whether the blank fills in and you walk into the trees at 11 p.m. and the file closes behind you like a drawer on a track, smooth and final, and nobody ever finds you because there's nothing left to find. The mountain keeps count. Don't let it count you. Thanks for watching, and thanks for spending your evening with me. If this one kept you up a little later than you planned, you're in good company. I want to hear from you tonight. If you found a filing cabinet with reports from the future, would you read them? Would you act on what they said? Or would you close the drawer and walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're new here, welcome to Dark Horror Narrations. We do this every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the dark.